I changed my clothes.
I didn't notice. I wasn't looking at that. All I had was a visual of you in your bathrobe next to your pellet stove all day long.
That's not a pretty thing.
All day long, all I could picture.
Try to call there. There's a note. Sometime non
Good evening. Welcome to the March 9th, 2017 meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee. The meeting will start at 6:35. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of February 23rd, 2017. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Karen, Ms. Ryder.
For the record, I will not be approving these minutes because this meeting took place while many members of the community and the school community specifically were not here to be able to attend and make comments if they wished.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
I abstain.
I abstain.
2 abstentions, 1 no. Next up, normally the next item on the agenda is public comment, but tonight I'm going to ask that the committee, if they'll allow, to change the agenda slightly by having a presentation from the Chatham Elementary School students first.
Good evening, and I'm Ashley Borgia, and this is Lear Wood, and we want to share with you the Look for the Good project. This project was about looking for the good in yourself and sharing gratitude with other people. It all started when James Mosquito rescued a humpback whale from 1,200 pounds of crab trap lines. Instead of just leaving, the whale shared her gratitude for her rescue by nudging all the rescuers in the chest. His simple acts of kindness inspired Mrs. Kubitsky to create the Look for the Good project.
The project was a 10-day campaign. Each day, the student council made announcements to the school about ways each person could be grateful. Each day, students wrote these thoughts of gratitude on sticky notes. Also, throughout the building, there were gratitude spots. If you stepped on one of the spots, you needed to say out loud what you were grateful for. The student council collected and hung these notes on our gratitude walls. Here is an example of part of the walls.
Wow. Wow.
It's a lot of gratitude.
At the end of the project, each person was asked to write a You Matter letter to someone, and they were asked to read it to that person. I wrote a letter to Paige, and I received a letter from Abby.
I wrote a letter to my mom and read it to her on her birthday. Last time we were here, we shared that we would be raising money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Foundation. We are happy to report that we raised $660. Mrs. Clary's classroom earned the most donations. Other good news is that 4th grade went to the Boston Museum of Science. Grade 3 also went to Boston on a duck tour.
Upcoming events include we, grade 4, are going to the National Seashore with a high school program called No Barriers. They visited CES today and taught us what we will be exploring on this field trip. Also, we are very excited to have a Patriot player and author, Malcolm Mitchell, coming to CES to read his book titled The Magician's Hat. He will also be bringing a magician to our school. We want to thank the Chatham Police and Fire Department Associations, Art of Charity, CBI, and the PTO for all the donations that made this event possible.
Finally, we would like to invite you all to our Pto Book Fair that starts next Monday. Monday morning, we will have a book fair breakfast, and on Thursday, Mr. Bob Stack will be hosting an author's night with his books. Thank you for letting us share what all the good news is at CES.
This is Ashley Borgia
And Lear Wood,
signing off.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Brian, you say something?
Ms. Dowd.
I would like to say to the two of you that not only could we hear everything you said clearly, but you were very interesting and read very well. Now, the project, on the other hand, was fabulous. We don't hear too much about paying attention to the good things. We always hear things that aren't going well. So this is really wonderful. Thank you very much.
This is a thank you letter from some of our students from CPS.
Would you just say that so people can hear you?
This is a thank you letter from some of our other students from CPS.
Looks like scribble.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice job.
All right, any other comments?
Hi. I'm Sheila House, the Harvard Youth Counselor, and you have postcards that I've put in front of all of you for the movie Screenagers. It's going to be playing Wednesday, March 22nd at the high school from 6 to 7:30 p.m. I'm more excited about this event than I've been working for the town for 17 years, and this is something that I'm really passionate about because technology has just exploded over the past 15 to 20 years, and it's been hard to know how to respond to it with regards to young people. So this film is about an hour long. It follows a pediatrician and her kids, and it shows how digital media impacts kids' brains and their social and emotional development, which is the part that I deal with the most. And there's going to be the peer leaders are going to be emceeing. There's free childcare. The National Honor Society kids are doing that. Refreshments, and there'll be a short panel following the film, which is about an hour long. And the panel is made up of Dr. Bart Main from Cape Cod Healthcare, Deb Martin from the DA's office, Fiona Jensen from Commerce Choice, myself, Joy Jordan from the Harwich PTO, and two Monomoy seniors who are going to answer any questions that parents might have as far as how they can have been successful in reducing being on phones all the time and iPads. So I really encourage all of you to come, tell everybody about it, and if you have any questions, you can email me. My email's on the card, or give me a call. Okay?
And just so everyone is clear, it's on March 22nd, 6 o'clock at the Monomoy High School Auditorium.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, our next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody who is wishing to address the school committee this evening? I would point out that it is our policy that comments from the public be heard at this time and not during the discussion part of the meeting. So if you are here to address the school committee to talk about one of the issues that's before us for discussion, I would urge you to speak now as opposed to later. Is there anybody who wants to speak? Oh,
Hi, my name is Judith Underwood. I'm a resident of Harwich, and I have two children in the school system, one in the high school and one in the middle school. And I sent you all an email, I think about 20 minutes before your meeting. That was during the February vacation, because I just found out about it, not knowing that you'd be meeting during February vacation. So thank you for, I had asked for a postponement in your discussion about the government class. So thank you for pushing that decision off. So I'm an educator. I actually taught at Chatham High School for 3 years in social studies, and I'm a firm believer that every student should have civics. And the government class here is a civics class. And it, as curriculum goes, and I've written a lot of curriculum, I've put together 9 courses for Chatham High School. It's really one of the best courses I've ever seen. And people when I say that my kids are at Monomoy High School, when I'm around the Cape doing work, they're like, oh, they know about the government class. So, number one, it's important that every student come out of the high school knowing how the government works. Why is that important? Because we're not only teaching them math and science and how to write well, we're teaching them critical thinking, and we're teaching them how to be good community parts of their community. And if they don't understand how the government runs, that's not a good thing. That means that they're not going to be active participants. They're not going to vote. They're not going to go what's going on. They're not going to be engaged in their community. It's really amazing when we go to town meeting and there are the students from this class. You know, that's very unusual here on Cape Cod. And quite frankly, when you're marketing this high school, that should be part of your marketing plan, because to me, that's a huge draw. Again, when I meet people through work, they know about it. Politicians know about it. You know, the debates that have been here for years are really well known within the political field at the state level and at the federal level. It's, but really the core of civics duty is to really understand how your government works, and to take that away from students and to tell them that it's an elective. And I can tell you, having taught high school for 5 years, students aren't going to necessarily sign up for it. They're going to take something else. But I think it's our duty as adults to require students to go through this. And I think Mr. Alexander might back me up here. Every student that comes out of that experiential learning, they are engaged at some level. They can read the newspaper. They know what's going on at the local, state, and federal and international level. And that's really special and really important. We're not only training students to go to college or to go into a profession, but to be an active part of their society. And I know a lot of school systems have taken away government and civics. But you know what? You don't need to do that. You can figure out another way to do the schedule. And I know, you know, money's tight, but 4 years of math and no civics does not make a good equation, does not make a good citizen. And part of our duty as educators is to make good citizens. So please consider that. And I know a number of letters have come in from Robin Wilkins sent you a letter, I believe, and Tom Johnson, and former state rep Kathleen Tian. I think you should have received her letter. So there's a number of people in town that are very concerned about this, and I hope a number of students too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi there, my name is Joy Jordan. I have 4 students in the district, and in the spirit of you guys hearing compliments as well, I just wanted to start off by saying I've been really pleased and encouraged by some of the innovative programs I'm seeing, such as the seminar program at the middle school and the new Jocelyn Hour and Global Studies initiatives at the high school. I think those are really great student-focused programs, and I am really supportive of them. I did just have a couple of thoughts about this whole government thing, and I think it's such a shame that it's the one part that's being held up in a greater discussion about scheduling flexibility for high schoolers and about the Global Studies program. And as has been discussed at a lot of the school committee meetings, I think that there are lots of options for keeping government a part of the program. And I don't think anyone has talked about cutting it, and I feel like there's a little too much fear being brought to the discussion that hasn't necessarily needed to be there, because I think no one seems to think that it's not a valuable topic to be discussed. And in my experience as a parent, my students are learning civics and government starting in kindergarten, integrated into all of their subjects. So I think that's overlooked, that it's not just one course, 1 year of their schooling. It is something that is integrated in all of their subjects, starting in kindergarten all the way up. So I think those are points that kind of need to be considered in this discussion, because I think something like the Global Studies program and the scheduling flexibility are such benefits for students that they need to be considered in the whole, in the entirety of the proposals. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to address the school committee? Okay, thank you very much. We have another student representative, Lauren Handel. How are you?
Hi, how are you? My name is Lauren Handel. I'm a senior here at Monomoy. I will be highlighting some of the moments, projects, and events at the high school in these past couple of weeks. Last Thursday, boys basketball defeated Sturgis East 53-40 in the first round of tournament. Monomoy went on to defeat Old Colony in the semifinals 64-47. With this victory, they have reached the Division IV final round and have made the longest postseason run in school history. The boys face Cathedral tomorrow night in Brockton at 7:30 for the championship. In other news, JOSM Power Hour started today. JOSM gives students an opportunity to study quietly, receive one-on-one extra help, or work on projects during the day, every day. There are over 50 enrichment opportunities and over 30 different teachers offering extra help each JOSM block. And after trying it out today, you can already hear the positive feedback from both students and teachers. In the arts, the spring musical is coming out soon. Monomoy Theater Company is producing the show Catch Me If You Can, which is based on the 2002 movie of the same title. The show is March 15th to 18th at 7 p.m., and there will be a 3 p.m. matinee on Saturday with a special $5 cost for senior citizens. Also, the Wellness Department presents March Madness at Monomoy High School. Students and staff helped organize a Cape Cod Healthcare blood drive on Monday, and many Monomoy students gave blood for the cause. Yesterday morning, various health organizations in the community set up stations in the gym for a wellness fair. A few of the other health-related events include Hoops for Heart and a volleyball tournament for a cause, which raises money for pancreatic cancer. Also, Monomoy High School Job Fair is March 16th from 3 to 5 p.m. in the gym. This fair is open to Monomoy High School students and community members. Monomoy High School continues to prioritize community-to-school connections. Our own teacher, David Alexander, who coordinated our highly popular and highly successful internship program, has been working closely with the Chambers of Commerce's to offer this community job fair. Capabilities, Cape Associates, Chatham-Barzin, Liberty Commons, Puritan of Cape Cod, Wauquasit Resort and Golf Club are just a few on the long list of businesses attending. Congratulations again to the boys basketball, and best of luck to them in the finals tomorrow night. Finally, this is my last night speaking as the high school student representative. Thank you to the school committee members for your time and hospitality. From now on and into next year, the student rep will be Junior Grace Boyle. Thank you.
Before you go, any questions or comments, thoughts? Could you tell us again the nights and the times for the play?
Sure. It's March 15th to 18th at 7 p.m., and there's a 3 p.m. matinee on Saturday.
Oh, March.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lauren.
We really appreciate you. Next up on the agenda is recognitions. Mr. Carpenter.
Again, just to tag on what Lauren said, I really would like to congratulate the boys basketball team for their success so far. And I also want to give condolences from the school community and myself to school committee member Steve Duvall, who isn't here tonight because of the passing of his mother.
Thank you. All right. Reports and discussions. First item is the Monomoy Regional High School Key Club field trip to Springfield, Mass. Going to fly out there. Anybody making a presentation for that?
I met today with Katie Kelly, who is the administrative assistant to Principal Burkhead, who will be traveling to Springfield along with Jen Police with the Key Club. And the purpose of the trip, it's the reason that we're here is because it is an overnight trip. And it's the Key Club District Educational Conference being held in Springfield, Mass. And it gives them an opportunity to meet other students from other Key Clubs, learn more about community service opportunities, workshops to build leadership skills, and improve club participation. And, excuse me, and then there's an election of district Key Club leaders that take place. And this is on Friday. They'll leave on Friday, March 31st at 3 o'clock. and then they will come back on Sunday, April 2nd, how time flies, at 3 p.m. And it's funded by the Key Club, and they'll also be sharing a bus with other Key Clubs from the area.
Thank you, Ms. Izernio. Any questions? Any concerns anybody has? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the Key Club trip for March 31st, 2017 through April 2nd, 2017.
Second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's unanimously voted for. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Monomoy Regional School District Memorial Policy. We're here to have a report from the Policy Subcommittee on that issue. Is Ms. Scott?
Yes, the Policy Subcommittee met for the first time on this past Monday, which would have been March 6th, where we took the MASCs, or the Mass Association of School Committees. They give us a recommended policy for use as a base and a framework. So what we did was we took that policy, and then amongst our discussion, we decided to add in some of the explanations from research that we had found. So we have a recommended policy for FFA, and I was thinking we should read it because it's fairly short.
Please do.
So memorials. The district welcomes the opportunity to recognize and honor a life lost and desires to help in the grieving and healing processes. The district is obligated, however, to exercise caution in the method used to recognize the deceased member of our community and his or her family. As places designed primarily to support learning, school sites should not serve as the primary location for permanent memorials. Research indicates two potential problems. First, physical memorials have the potential to glamorize death in the minds of some students. Young people who suffer from depression or other psychological problems and are at risk for suicidal behavior can be motivated to take their own lives when they are exposed to a memorial immortalizing a death. Secondly, memorials at a school will be a constant physical reminder of the victim and may continue to trigger trauma responses in students and staff long after the event took place. Memorials can be an ongoing visual reminder of what happened, leading to students worrying if it will happen again or wondering if they could be next. From this perspective, memorials in the school or on school property pose a significant risk because it is almost impossible for students to avoid the physical reminders of a death. Viewing memorials needs to be an opportunity of choice, as we all grieve differently, and for some, it is healthier to not be reminded. Memorials activities that the families and friends may want to consider include perpetual scholarships established in the name of the lost community member, donation to a charity or program that is dedicated to helping students, collection of money to be donated to the deceased family or charity of their choice, a sympathy card from the school, possibly signed by students and staff, and flowers at the funeral. Any permanent memorials in existence before the adoption of this policy can only be removed by a vote of the school committee. And then there are a couple of sources cited. So that's this would be our first reading of the policy.
Okay.
So,
Any discussion at this point in this policy? Ms. Ryder?
I would propose just to change the first sentence slightly, combine actually the first one and the second one, and take out a word in the third paragraph, that just those things. Do you want me to read what I would propose for the first sentence? Well, the Monomoy Regional School District welcomes the opportunity to recognize and honor a life lost. The district is obligated to exercise caution in the method used to recognize the deceased member of our community and his or her family. It just seems to make more sense, seems to read better. And in the third paragraph, memorials in the school or on school property pose a risk, because I would take out significant. I think it's pretty subjective. Aside from that, that's the only comment I have.
Between now and the next meeting, could you provide everybody with a copy of the?
Yep.
Any further discussion, any comments on Ms. Ryder's amendment or any discussion about the memorial policy itself?
Just a
Mr.
comment
Russell.
to the subcommittee and personally for a serious and sensitive task. I think you hit the mark. I personally feel that a perpetual scholarship or something like that is the way to send a message to not only the kids and staff, but the community. So I like to see that included in this policy.
Any further discussion, comments? I would like to add, as part of this discussion, that as many people are aware, we have received a request by the family and relatives and many, many friends of Jordan Fisher that in addition to such a memorial policy, that this school committee vote to retire the jersey that Jordan wore, number 23, to raise the jersey forever in the rafters of the gymnasium, and also provide the, well, that was what the request was. I received a communication from the attorney Rick Barry, on behalf of the family earlier today, asking that I report that they are withdrawing their request to have the jersey hung from the rafters. And at this point, their request is that the school committee vote to retire the 23 jersey, and also, in addition to that, to provide them with the original, or to provide them with the jersey itself so that they can retain it as their personal memorialization of their son, Jordan. In light of that, is there any discussion on the request by the Fisher family as amended? Ms. Scott?
I'd like to move that out of respect for the loss for the Fisher family, that we provide them with the Monomoy basketball jersey number 23.
Is there a second? Is there's no second?
Second.
Second, okay. Discussion?
Just a question,
Ms. Ryder?
that it also be retired, is that part of the motion? Does that
No.
be provided? Okay.
Any further discussion?
I would suggest
Mr. Russell.
The shirt that Jordan wore be given to the family, but I would not want it to be retired.
That's not part of the motion at this time.
Then I heard it wrong. I'm sorry.
Want me to reread it?
Sure.
Well, actually, it may not be exactly what I said. I believe I said, I move out of respect for the loss of the Fisher family, that we provide the family with the Monomoy basketball jersey number 23.
And that was seconded by Ms. Stout. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Ms.
I was just going to say, would that be upon completion of this year's season, at the end of the year? Do we have to put?
It is my understanding that there is a student wearing that jersey, and we are still in the playoffs, so probably would make sense to, but we could leave that to the discretion of the athletic director, unless anybody has a problem with that. So do you feel a need to amend the motion, or?
If you feel that I need to, no. Unless you feel I need to.
Are you requesting that she?
No, I'm not requesting. I just was clarifying that was the assumption of everyone, that it would be not until after the season, just because they're in the playoffs right now.
Okay. Well, the motion is to provide the family with the Jordan shirt number 23. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Is there anyone opposed? It's unanimous vote. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the graduation requirements. We have a presentation this evening from Mr. Burkhead. Further presentation?
Good evening, everyone. At first, if I could, just want to follow up on Lauren's mention of Joss Mauer. I know last meeting I was here, it was approved, and for the audience's review, it's a concept that started over a year ago that was quite innovative, coming from our teachers and research from schools are running something similar down south, very uncommon around here, and took a year to develop with student input, parent input, overwhelming teacher support, and we implemented it. We started it today with excitement. I will report it's the first day. I haven't slept in a month, especially last night, and with 600 kids going out all at once to lunch, but with multiple options, similar to a college type of setting, but trusting they would make the right choices, and with our great teachers, they did. We found the place calmer. It's a calm school. The kids are great, but it just felt relaxed. As you know, typical schools are run from bell to bell, and it always seems like you're in a rush to do things sometimes when you live a life like that, because it's not how real life is. So we're trying to eliminate some of that. So we offer choices. And as Lauren said, as I walked the building for that hour, it's amazing what you see. I invite you to come in and check it out at some point. For example, I went down to the auditorium and there were 20 students in the jazz band. One of our volunteers that typically comes in after school was down there during the school at 11:20 in the morning. Kids were rocking out the jazz. As I exited the auditorium, there were another 10 kids working on theater props and getting ready for the show. Go around the corner, we've got kids in every classroom getting academic help and support. One teacher gave an example. He's here tonight. He'll probably be speaking a while. Mr. Alexander gave a test today, and 5 or 6 kids weren't able to finish in the time allotted. Typically, what happens then is you're chasing the kids down and make it up after school. And what better thing for a kid to do than to take a test after school, right? So it spills into the next day, and then the kids forget it. Well, those kids were all there, all 5 or 6 of them at Josimar finished the test. The AP students got some AP boot camp help. Their test is coming up in May, typically done after school on weekends. Doesn't impede on their schedules after school and work, athletics. So the place was rocking as planned. It was well prepared. I want to thank our teachers, support staff, custodians, cafeteria work. We all took a big risk, and you had trust in us. I'll be back at some other point. I fully expect our data to pan out very successfully and trend towards the positive as we expected. But the first day was a huge success, and there's great enthusiasm for it and innovation in our school. Leading into our graduation requirements, I just wanted to review the goals of this and get back to the big picture on why we came here initially. And the graduation requirements and credits align with the Mass Corps and other schools across the state of Massachusetts. Currently, right now, we are in excess with graduation requirements of at least a half year, up to a year over what most schools, the majority of schools, overwhelmingly number of schools offer. So our kids are really trying to get things done 4 years where other schools can do in a short amount of time and are more restricted. So we want to align this with the Mass Corps recommendations at minimum, which we do. Allow our students more flexibility in scheduling, more likely to get the courses they want. What we're seeing right now, and I'm going to give you some case examples to see how this is really impacting us in practical purposes for you this evening and to bring it to light. But this is really hurting our kids the way we do this. And again, it's nobody's fault. It's just when we merged, we took two requirements. We saw how it worked. We've had a schedule change since then. And we're seeing that we haven't adapted our graduation requirements to fit that. And we need to evolve and to do that. To allow our kids, especially our seniors that are going off into colleges, more flexibility in what they would like to take. Right now they have very little, and it's not a good thing for our kids. A lot more opportunities, do you like the choice I just said that? Less restrictive requirements will allow students to access classes centered on their future goals and personal preferences. Third to last, allow the Monomoy High School to include New Vision or Global Studies path for all students. I know it's been the government comment has been mentioned, and I love the town I work in. Both towns, towns that feed into our school because there's public opinion and dissent, and it helps us understand where the community is coming from. And I'm here tonight just to clarify that our government class will still be here. It will still be very strong, and every student will have access to it. And I expect the overwhelming majority will still take it. It's not going anywhere. What I will add is that we are evolving and becoming one of the premier visionary schools on Cape Cod with ideas like our Global Studies program that was presented here and unanimously approved, which allows our students the opportunity to take on a more challenging coursework and receive an additional acknowledgement on their diploma, which which will help them compete and give them an edge against other high school kids coming out of high school. So that's something that is rare, that other schools around here don't offer, that we will be offering. We need to make room for that. And decrease the number of dropouts, students over 5 years. Basically, we're saying is back to that, having so many restrictions and so many credits to get more than any other high school. What we're finding is a handful of our kids are just going and getting a degree, but they're getting it in the 5th year, which counts against the graduation requirements. Not the main reason, but just the effect you need to hear, because when those numbers come out, this plays into it. So it's a very important that we address this. And the last one, I didn't have this in the last slide, but I thought it was important that you know it. This plan has been being developed for over a year and a half. It's not something we just came up with a month or two ago. It's been, like all our decisions, it involves our staff, involves our students, the superintendent's office, and it's been supported by all our departments, including our social studies department, unanimously. So the government conversation was included. We're very confident, again, that our students will leave here with very civic-minded and responsible and be able to think critically, make decisions, and learn how government operates. In fact, we start that in 8th grade here, right when they get here, it goes throughout. So our social studies program will just get stronger with this, and that's why the social studies department supports it. And Mr. Alexander, department head, will come and speak to that momentarily. So I want to make sure that people understood that, because I don't think the community was aware of that. Mr. Weinberg had asked me at the previous meeting what the social studies department thought, so I want to make sure that we address that this evening before you vote. And the principal superintendent all agreed to that. And so what I'd like to do next is have our guidance counselor, guidance director, or department head, Ms. Jen Police, come up. And she's just going to give you a flavor, because all the kids' schedules, graduation requirements, college requests go through her office. I asked her just to come up with a handful of 4 examples of what's happening with our current graduation requirements, and to give you a flavor of what we're living with on a daily basis and why we have to make these changes. Ms. Police.
Hello, thank you again for hearing out our vision for our requirement change. You know, first, I just want to say that I'm proud to stand up here, and we're a small high school, but we offer a robust program of studies, I think, that rivals schools like Barnstable and Onset, and schools that are twice the size. And with that, you know, there's a challenge. It's a blessing, and it's also a curse. And you know, the blessing is we offer a lot of courses. The curse is we can't essentially get all of our kids that want them into them, because we're so prescriptive. And you know, I'm just going to give you a few examples of, you know, our number 1 student last year. She had to take an online AP Chem class, and she had to do experiments in her kitchen. And that's because the AP Chem class that we offered conflicted with something that she had to take. We have actually 4 students in online world language, because they wanted to get it conflicted with select choir, band, and wellness. So we have kids that have to take online major courses in order to take some of our art electives. We had a parent that considered moving her student to Onset because she couldn't get into honors English and band at the same time. We have students, my friend over there, and I had to bring that up. And that was a hard conversation. Yeah, and
Please, ma'am, please.
Miss Underwood took her daughter for 2 weeks, or a week or so. Yes. And she couldn't have honors English and band at the same time. And it was frustrating, and she had to pull her daughter, well, her daughter's choice. And you did come back, thankfully, but she's in online English, I believe. Right. So there. But not ideal. And you know, we would like to see our students in our courses with our teachers, because that's the best practice. And I think we have 26 kids in online courses right now, when they should be sitting in our classrooms, and they're not. And that's because they have to choose between honors English and select choir or honors English and band, or AP Chem and select choir. And you know, in this day and age, there's no reason why a student can't have an AP English, band, and a world language at the same time. But here, that can't always happen. And that's because we are prescriptive, because most of our classes are required for 4 years. And that is a logjam in our schedule, and that's where we're at. And this is, you know, you're going to hear from Mr. Alexander next. And, you know, we're just asking that we can do this to provide a better pathway for all of our students. Thanks.
Thank you.
You got it.
And next, I'd like to invite Mr. Alexander up, our Social Studies Department Head, to share a statement regarding that. While he's coming up, I'm going to just put the next slide up. This is just a reminder of something I've shared before, that we are not, you know, when you see our requirements on the left is share at 2016-17, and then our recommendation for this year. If you notice, compared to most Cape schools, the pinkish red is lower than, and the green is above. And the social studies is right in line. The sandwich one, the asterisks are there because they can choose multiple of electives, so that's not a mandated course, including psychology and other things. So in the first slide I shared a few meetings ago, I included schools over the bridge, you know, like in Sudbury, Wayland. They had less requirements than us. So by no means, we're still the second most restrictive, even with this change. So it's not unreasonable. It's just trying to get us a little closer and kids a little more flexibility without getting rid of too many things, trying to keep both at the same time. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alexander. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I just have a few prepared words about the social studies graduation requirements, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Thank you.
My name is David Alexander. I'm the social studies department head. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a teacher for 24 years, the last 17 of which have been here in Chatham and now at Monomoy. I'm here to recommend that you support the proposed revisions to the program studies, or the graduation requirements. These changes and their impact have been discussed in our department for over 2 years. And I'm happy to report we endorsed them unanimously, again yesterday when all of us met to discuss it once again. The Social Studies Department envisions keeping American government as one of 3 required elective options for the senior year. By this, I mean that students will be required to take either government, a science core class, or a world language core class. With this in mind, we predict a very healthy turnout for students who will choose to take government. That will also include AP Government and the very popular We the People program. In closing, I should also mention that with the state social studies frameworks in transition right now, we feel our proposed scope and sequence puts our department in a position to not only continue our strong tradition of teaching government, but also to open up some room to continue developing our global studies program, in addition to making any necessary revisions once the state has their final plans in place. So at this point, I'd just take any questions you might have in case there are. Yes, Ms. Dowd.
Do you think everything that's taught now in 1 year wonderful government program can be smushed into other years and taught just as effectively for kids to learn for later?
What do you mean?
Well, from what I understand, we have a very effective government program where kids do not just rote learning, but scenarios and a lot of participatory things. And that takes time. And if you could hand somebody some pieces of paper for them to memorize, and they could learn the different parts of government and who's in those positions right now, but they wouldn't remember it years later. So how much do you think that we would lose if we, for the kids that probably need it the most, maybe not the ones that need it the most, but I understand that we teach math at all grade levels, social studies at all grade levels, but the meat of what's taught in government at 12th grade takes a year to teach that. Have we been teaching anything frivolous during that time?
I'd say no.
Okay. So we'll be losing something. There will be a loss.
In what way?
The students that have learned a tremendous amount during our government classes will no longer learn that.
Why?
They won't be in those classes.
They will. It will be 1 of 3 required electives in their senior year.
Right, but not as a requirement.
Yes.
So every student that leaves Monomoy High School will have learned everything that is being taught in that government class now by the time they graduate.
No, what I'm saying is they'll have a choice amongst either a world language or a science to take government.
Right.
So we envision, for example, right now we offer, I think it's 6 government classes. We're envisioning that if this is the scenario, that we'll have 3 or 4, including AP government and including with people.
I'm very supportive of all of these different things that you're proposing for global studies, everything I know about. But I feel like reading, writing, arithmetic, and government are things we need.
I would agree.
If you were doing away with, 1 of the 2 years of world history or something else, I wouldn't feel the way I do. But
well, I'd also add that, and I'm sure everyone realizes this, government's taught, obviously K through 12, but speaking as someone who's taught government for 17 years, as well as world history and other classes, government seeps into every class that I teach, and I'm sure Mr. Carpenter would agree with me, who's here tonight. I think we're doing what we can do in the reality that we are facing, whether it's regards to staffing or what have you. We're going to offer a vibrant government program, and we still teach government throughout our other classes. But in order to do things, you need to make some tough choices. And having been a part of those decisions, again, it takes a long time to kind of see the bigger picture, and that might be the danger for people who aren't intimately involved in these discussions for a number of years, as we've been, that it takes a while to wrap your mind around something that maybe you don't agree with at first, but when you look at bigger picture, you do. And I certainly feel that way. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Schreider.
So you're saying there are currently 6 sections of government classes, and you're proposing that there will be 3 or 4. So you've already cut in half the amount of kids that will be taking.
But it's tough to say how many that there'll be because it'll be a choice.
Correct. So now that they have 3 choices, it's likely that, we'll just say, hypothetically, a third will take government, a third will take science, a third will take world language. So you could have a third of the students that are currently taking it in the future. You're already proposing either 3 or 4 sections instead of 6. So you're already proposing that it's going to be.
I'm guessing, because I don't know how many people are going to pick it.
You're already proposing 3 or 4 sections instead of 6. That's essentially cutting it in half. So it'll be cut in half or cut by a third.
It's
and
tough to say.
You've mentioned the bigger picture. Well, the bigger picture, if I'm understanding it, is perhaps you're referring to global studies.
That's right.
Mr. Alexander, we're going to have one person talk at a time.
Okay.
Which we've already voted on, which begs the question, since these are integrally linked, why didn't we vote on them at the same time? Why was it not proposed at the same time? That's not specifically a comment or a question for you. I think that's more for the administration. But that to me is a key point. If global studies had been proposed, and we've been told at the time that the effect would be that the 12th grade government or civics classes would not be required any longer, the vote might have been different. And I certainly would have asked for other proposals besides what we're being given now, which is a result, and I would say probably it looks like a direct result of a prior vote on global studies. So there is a question in that I really would like an answer. Perhaps Mr. Burkhead or Mr. Carpenter could answer why were these changes not proposed at the same time?
Well, right now we have Mr. Alexander speaking, so
that's fine. So
let's
I can
direct
hold
our
that
questions
off.
to him
That's
for
fine.
now.
Yep.
Any further questions for Mr. Alexander? None.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration.
I would just say that I don't know the exact dates, but I believe they were presented at the same time. We've been having this discussion for several meetings, months, now, so I think they were brought up at the same time. The global studies was voted on the night. This has been dragged out for several meetings.
Ms. Ryder.
If I'm not mistaken, there was some sort of push to vote on the global studies. I mean, normally we have 2 readings of everything, and there was no linkage between the two, and they are linked. There was nothing mentioned that, well, you know, we're doing this and it's going to have this effect. I'm sorry, unless I missed it, maybe y'all heard it, and I missed it.
Mr. Russell.
I had another take. I heard both, and I heard that 2 goods, something had to be shaved, and that's tied into this graduation of 100 credits lowering to allow the flexibility in senior year. And as I listened, I knew that the social studies department, with their global study recommendation, was going to have to take a hit with that required senior class that would be turned into an elective. So I knew there was a challenge to vote for the global studies or vote for the status quo. So that's how I took it.
Mr. Carpenter.
In the past month.
I think another thing to emphasize is global studies isn't a history department course. It's a global studies perspective through the entire curriculum. So it's global when it comes to science. It's global when it comes to to the English department. So so each of those departments in the process of implementing a global studies program need to make room for globally based things, not just a U.S. focused curriculum. So it's we're kind of hung up on government in in the social studies department, but both of these are actually things that impact all departments, not just one department.
Ms. Ryder.
I'm all for global studies. My background, I studied French and Spanish. I had a lot of global studies when I went through high school and college. I am not against global studies whatsoever, but when it's at the expense of government courses, then I really have an issue, because they're both really important, especially with the political situation in this country. 50% of people that don't even vote, especially younger voters, it's just as important, if not more important, than global studies.
Ms. Stowe.
I had some communication from the head librarian who also spoke against having government given up. None of these comments, and also the emergency management person in town. And then, of course, the Chronicle just came out talking about this very thing. There is no, I think I mentioned maybe last time, that as far as I'm concerned, how we got here was when we lost the $800,000 when our budget was cut and our staff was cut a couple of years ago. And we had to go from the 8 periods where we had plenty of electives to the 7 periods where we are now. And so the end of the global studies, there's lots of support on. And like Karen, I only heard that when we were voting for that. And don't justify all the means. And it just seems as though there could be some other way other than this. There are a lot of people that are very concerned about we could have government and American history, and we could also have global studies. But we shouldn't cut out what we're doing in this country and our ability to be doing a very good job at our, originally it was reading, writing, and I don't know what the word was. It was essentially civics was the original intent of education, and I believe it still is. So I think we're losing something very important that we need to look at a different way.
Mr. Alexander, could I ask you another question at the podium? I apologize for not asking you before, since you're still here. Could you?
I should bring this thing home with me. My wife will listen to me if I...
Doesn't work. Could you clarify something for me? We've received a lot of communications from people about the government program, and a lot of the comments have been that we should continue to have government as a required course. Could you clarify, is government currently a required course?
Yes, so right now, students take that their senior year.
Okay, it's mandatory.
Correct.
What are the four choices? In other words, we have 4 required courses now, and there will be 3 if we adopt this program. What are the 4 courses that we have now?
Okay, so in freshman year, you would take World History 2, which runs from the French Revolution to the present, which is impossible to cover. Thematically, yes, but chapter by chapter, no. Then sophomore year, you have U.S. History 1. Junior year, you have U.S. History 2. And then senior year, right now, you have government.
U.S. History also?
Yes.
Or is it, in other words, the junior year, does that cover a different time
Yes,
period?
so U.S. 1 is pre-colonial up till the Civil War, and then 2 is basically end of the Civil War, Reconstruction up to the present.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? Questions for Mr. Alexander? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Burkhead, are you finished with your presentation?
I just want to summarize by stating that the last bullet of my previous thing, that this was unanimously supported over 2 years' worth of work by our social studies department, all departments, principal, teachers. We've been in this business a long time. We know what's best for our kids. This is good for our kids. Our current situation, it puts us at a distinct disadvantage and handcuffs our scheduling situation to allow our kids to get a variety of classes that they need. We gave some examples of the things we deal with. This change is well thought out. I make all our final decisions as principal based on how I would want my own child to receive an education. I would thoroughly support this, and I ask that you do too. So thank you for considering it.
Actually, I have another question for Mr. Carpenter. You mentioned that global studies is not a course, but is a concept that's going to be taught throughout the school and in many subject areas. Purely social study areas, or?
Ultimately, we would create a list of courses across departments that you would need to take so many of them to receive a global studies diploma. So you could imagine you might need to take an Irish literature or Russian literature type course that in the English department, and take a course in science that may have a global focus. Take a global focus course in your sophomore, junior, senior year in the history department. I think the challenge that the history department has, and I know that they're wrestling with, is when everyone at the moment is largely taking essentially 3 years of U.S. history government, there's not space in there to have global courses. So, so where do you make room so that students that want to go that route can take a course that might be on, global crisis or, sort of a current issues that are facing the world. In addition to, taking a world language each of the 4 years, I think was part of the initial conversation. So it's, so it is one of those that's not just history. We've been sort of focused on history, but global studies is really looking at it globally through the curriculum.
If we eliminate the requirement of 4 years of social studies and reduce it to 3 years of social studies, will the government core continue to be a full year course, or will it be a? Yes. It will be a full year.
And I'll give my, if I can give just my quick 2 cents. I'm actually a little more optimistic than Mr. Alexander on scheduling, just because I think that what you'll find is that your students that that really want to go on on to the best colleges are going to take 4 years of all the academic subjects. And, some of what Mr. Burkhead is trying to do is to create some flexibility so that they can pick up that extra science, senior year or an extra history class, senior year. So I think that we're still going to see the bulk of our students, if the history department chooses to have U.S. history taught as a 2-year progression, that we'll still see the bulk of our students coming out with government. Alternatively, the department could go and look at compress U.S. history, and then it would be like the world history course that Mr. Alexander was talking about, where you're kind of going through chapters but not really getting enough depth into any one area. If you compress U.S. history to then have global be a second year course. But I want to emphasize, I'm a biologist. I leave history decisions to the history professionals.
Mr. Russell.
Just as a follow-up, I'm in favor of the move towards globalizing. I know the effect it has with that 4th year required government course. We're looking at a 2-pound item trying to be fit into a 1-pound bag. And there's really no way to get around that there are going to be some kids missing. I'm hopeful that with the staff for a year or 2 studying what is, and the passion behind that this will move us forward. For the sake of suggestions, which I'm sure you folks live it every day, the 2nd year of the U.S. history course, for those youngsters who would not in their senior year required to take the government course, there must be some days and lessons that they're exposed to in that 2nd year, especially in the springtime, of civics. So you're nodding your head, Mr. Alexander said, yes, there are some. Not that that's a desperate attempt to have an air to make up 3 weeks, but there is a straining in that 2nd year of U.S. history.
That sounds like an important enough comment that you should share it with everybody, Mr. Don't chew that gum. Whatever else people say to students.
How should I answer this? So in U.S. History 1, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would talk a little bit about the history behind the creation of the Constitution, but when you get to government, you actually get into where did it all come from? Where did we borrow? What did we create? That kind of thing. So you definitely get a big dose of it, Mr. Russell, in U.S. History 1 as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Stout.
What do we teach at 6th and 7th grade for history, for social studies?
Anybody here from the middle school?
So I'm just wondering, because we have world history in grade 8, 1, and world history in grade 9, 2, if there wouldn't be a way, I have no idea what's taught at 5th, 6th, 7th grade.
When I was in high school, we took history in elementary school and also in junior high school. Isn't that still the case?
I believe 6th is geography.
A resident expert
6th
on
grade
curriculum.
is geography, and 7th grade is ancient history.
Ancient.
Civilization.
Well, there we could do something.
Is there a history course before high school?
Yes. 5th grade is American history.
There was one in there somewhere.
So, my only comment are that all these things are good, but if I had put them in priority, government would be the one of all of them I'd keep.
Mr. Carpenter or Mr. Burkhead, whoever is appropriate to answer the question. I think there's been discussion before when we've discussed the graduation requirements about a concern about adverse effects on struggling learners and the graduation rates. In other words, the adverse effect on our graduation rates. Could you remind us or refresh us on what that concern is?
Sure. I think part of the conversation that Mr. Burkett has had is to to reduce slightly the total number of credits that students are required to get. And again, the examples that I brought up is it gives students second chances. For instance, I think a common thing that schools are having to deal with now is one of our athletes gets a concussion. They go to their guidance counselor, they've seen this police, and we might do a course load reduction. But if they don't bounce back from that concussion too soon, potentially they have to spend an extra year with us because they're a couple of credits short of this magic number that they need to graduate. And so part of the conversation is reduce the total number of credits by a couple so that we can ensure that more of our students are graduating with their cohort in 4 years. It also gives some students who may academically struggle a chance that you can actually fail a couple courses and still succeed, still get your diploma.
So that's a graduation credit reduction.
That's the total of credits. Was that part of the conversation?
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Scott.
So I'm trying to keep the bigger picture in mind with just the reducing of the overall credits, which is where this initially stemmed from. And I keep going back to the fact that it's, first of all, the senior year. So you have to you're required to have 4 years of English, 4 years of math. So those are your 2 courses, or 2 courses your senior year. And then you have to take your senior year 1 more social studies or science, or 2 more social studies or sciences. So you could take 2 sciences or 2 social studies your senior year. Am I making sense? Okay. So again, the bigger picture here is to open up the options for the students to be able to either go for their passion if they want to go more science, or go for their passion for more social studies. I appreciate your examples that you gave of the students and what they had. I'm a little bit confused if reducing science and social studies as a requirement for graduation, how that would match up with a student who can't take AP English and music. I don't know if I was missing, if that just would all fall into place somewhere. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So when you build a master schedule, it's essentially a puzzle. And much like Mr. Russell said, it's, right now we're trying to squeeze 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And we run, as many courses as some of the larger high schools with only 640 kids. So what ends up happening is we have 84 singleton courses, which means there's 1 section. So inevitably, something is going to conflict with something else. So we have a lot of students that cannot get a music, a world language, and an upper level course at the same time, because a lot of those are 1 section.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So then to follow up on that, while I'm not necessarily for you, sorry, or you can stay, it doesn't matter. I wasn't trying to, I'm not asking you questions, I'm sorry. I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around the focus on government, which is obviously important, and government is not just taught in government class. You're getting government through U.S. History 1 and U.S. History 2, and I also am a strong proponent of the global studies, because as great as the United States of America is, we're not the only place. It's kind of like Cape Cod. We live in a bubble here. We have to get over the bridge. You have to get out of the country. You have to learn about other countries and their governments, not just our government.
I'm not going over the bridge.
I try not to go over the bridge, but so I just think it's important to look at the bigger picture to say that even though we're reducing the social studies and the science requirements in terms of the structure, most of the kids are still going to take 4 years of each class. And those kids that don't, they're still going to be getting the solid education, and they're still going to be getting the information that they need from the other courses is where I'm kind of getting to. And if that just followed my train of thought, not a very consistent, but that's what's going on in my head.
So currently, if I can I'll just end with this. So currently, we have essentially just about every discipline is a 4-year requirement, including wellness. So essentially, our number 1 student is taking the same courses as our number 130 in the SCM class, the same courses, because it's prescriptive. Now, the level may be different, but the courses are essentially the same. So everybody's transcript looks very similar, and from a counseling perspective, when I'm trying to help a student sort of shape their pathway, it can be difficult when I have a student that's considering a future in science or medicine, and they're highly prescripted in the humanities. And this is just a way just to allow students, especially in their senior year, when they need to continue to rise, to be able to do that. And I'll just sort of end with that.
Ms. Ryder.
Nancy was mentioning looking at the bigger picture. Well, if we look at the bigger picture and look at this chart that was put up on there, the total credits needed for a diploma, if we reduce it by 4, we're below Onset, DY, Sandwich, and Sturgis. So to keep it at 100 as opposed to 96, really, we look better.
The credits. I don't know what the question was.
I'm just saying that, I don't see the need to drop it by the 4 credits.
I think when we look at our data, that all kids will take, 112 total and then script there. To reduce it for 4 just gives a little bit more flexibility for kids that may move in and be behind a year, for some of our kids that struggle. Not a major thing, slow, it puts us on the average there. But I think the majority of our kids, that will be a breeze, so it's not, it's not a huge thing, but 36, yeah. So that's why that is, just to put a little cushion for some of those kids that do struggle, to help them get over the hump. But again, most kids will make that easily, and then some.
Ms. Ryder.
So if we added back the 4 credits to bring it up to 100, then there could be 4 years of social studies, which would include the required U.S. government class. And that puts us more on par with the other schools in this chart. So I'm just saying, looking at the big picture, as Nancy was saying, that's more the bigger picture.
So you're referring to credits versus graduation requirements. It's not essentially the same thing. So when we reduce essentially this allows for 4 failures, so to speak. And we were 3, and we were proposing to go to 4, because our full year courses are 4 credits. Mm-hmm. So it's graduation requirement, number of courses, is not the same thing as credits, essentially. Because we're actually proposing a reduction in science and history.
Right. Well.
Stella.
So could we just do this with math? Could we just eliminate geometry and smush it in with some of the other things? I mean, I think what we're saying is so ridiculous when we say that things are taught from kindergarten up, because what's in that class is not taught any other time in any big degree, just like geometry or algebra 2 are not. Yes, we do teach some algebra in 3rd grade or so. But these comments, there is no disagreement at all about the information that we've learned so far about world languages or world global studies. But just that this taking government as something that we need as a basic thing, so kids can get out of school and they can know how our government works in a thorough way, and can be educated citizens. We are tonight, if we don't vote for government, are being derelict in our duty to provide an education for people to be good citizens and know what our government, we might know about Irish literature, but that is not necessary. A lot of the things we're doing are not necessary. Algebra 2 may not be, some people may get along fine without that, but what's being taught in government is necessary to be a good voter.
I have a question. Why was the proposal for social studies to take the hit, if you will, as opposed to math, for example? What are the 4 math requirements, or the 4? Yeah, what are the? What? Yeah, that's my basic question. Why not math instead of social studies?
Mass Core is, in Mass Core it's 4 years. Mass State College System, higher education. That's what they expect to see. That's sort of the minimum.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And the same with English, I assume.
Yes. Yep.
So we would still meet the core requirements that the colleges are expecting us to do by reducing the.
We actually exceed it. Colleges, it's 2 years of social studies, 3 years of science, 4 years of math, 4 years of English, and Mass Core is 3 years of social studies, 3 years of science.
Mr. Russell.
Thanks, Brian. Just a clarification for either one of you. Even though global studies, as we voted, is a blend throughout all of the subjects, I understand that. If we maintain the 4th year of obligation in the area of government and social studies, that would cause that department not to have any flexibility to allow the kids to enter into a global study experience? Yes or no?
I think you'd see fewer kids.
So there is a tie-in. It's the two goods being judged as to what has to give. Okay, there is a relationship between voting in favor of a global study experience for the kids in the future years, allowing government to be an elective, allows some flexibility.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to add the proposed global studies courses to an already hamstrung schedule. So we don't have the room, essentially.
Mr. Carpenter.
In terms of reducing the total number of credits, I also want to point out, I think I was talking about struggling learners. I could also point out a possibility or an option that dropping from 100 down to 96 also provides. I was having a meeting Monday morning with a gentleman who talked about graduating half a semester early from high school and what that afforded him to be able to do. But you do potentially open that door where where students who actually get all of the credits may decide to do things. And I had the situation when I was at my former district. There were some times that families that were struggling or had other reasons why their student wanted to launch a little bit earlier. They would have finished up their graduation requirements and started college. Oftentimes started at the community college half a year early. So there are other options that because our kids get currently they can amass up to 28 credits a year. So if we have something that gives them more flexibility to decide what's best in their best interest. I've had kids over the years that have headed off on different sorts of excursions, and others that have headed off to college or work based on where they and their families were.
Ms. Ryder.
I just wanted to say thank you, Terry, for making clear that, in fact, you had to ask the question whether there was a relationship between Global Studies program and the elimination of the government course as a requirement. I guess it wasn't understood previously. And you've mentioned that since the Global Studies program has been voted in, that keeping the government course as a required class, it's going to hamstring you. So again, I would request that next time there is a change in the curriculum that has a domino effect on the curriculum, or that it's intertwined, that you present them at the same time together. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Assuming it wasn't done that way the first time. Yeah. Ms. Stout.
Along that lines, is there any more thought about changing the U.S. history or government to make it more global, or will they stand alone to be representative of I was reading the article in the Chronicle, and they brought up something about how things might be evolving that I hadn't heard about. And did you read the article?
No.
Okay, well, it was, I don't have it with me, but it was something similar to that some of these courses would be evolving to maybe not take up our history and change over to be blended with global history. So rather than distinct courses.
I'm not sure the question.
Well, I'm not sure the question either. But I guess my question is, are the courses going to be staying the same with the content?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion? Is there a motion?
I would move that
Mr.
we
Russell.
accept the recommendation of the high school administration regarding graduation credit requirements as stated this evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any opposed?
No.
Opposed.
3 opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I vote yay. Yes. That's 3 opposed, right?
Opposed.
And 5 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the 2017-2018 school calendar. Mr. Kerr.
It was 3 opposed, 4 in favor. There's
4 in
7
favor.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I had that number wrong, Mr. Duvall. I counted Mr. Duvall.
You were talking to Mr. Duvall.
I was talking to him the whole time.
Can you
You got the
figure
number right.
what that is?
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you figure the math on that? 2.5 for opposed.
2.53.
What?
2.5 against, 3 for. The
Okay.
motion carries.
Okay.
2017-18 school calendar, Mr. Carpenter.
So in your packets is a draft school calendar. Looks in many ways very similar to the current year's calendar, with the staff coming back and having their first day on August 30th. They'll be here on the last Wednesday and Thursday of August. Then they would head off for a long Labor Day weekend, and following Labor Day, all of the students and staff would return. So the first day for students would be September 5th. In this calendar, this would have the final day of the school year as June 18th of 2018, pending snow days. It doesn't snow in Massachusetts or on Cape Cod, or so I've been told, particularly on the forecast at the moment. So other than that, we have, there's 18 early release days on this. We have set it up so that the first Wednesday of every month doesn't have an early release day, to facilitate having some school meetings or department meetings on those days. Happy to go and answer any other questions about it if you wish.
Any questions? Is there a motion regarding the school calendar?
I move to approve the 2017-2018 calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion now? Ms. Stout?
I just have a question. There was something about the school calendar this year that somebody had brought up that didn't work out well, but I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I
think it was the day-long professional development day.
I'm thinking it had to do with, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I just want to make sure we've taken care of whatever it was.
It's not okay.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something else.
Okay, so.
Has the discussion terminated?
No, we had a question. There was a question, and I said, I was trying to be respectful and wait to be called on. That was my mistake.
Ms. Stout, Ms. Scott, whatever your name is. Lord.
I think it had to do with the election, because I believe last year, or this current school year, the Cape-wide Professional Day was on Election Day, which
Correct.
kind of fell around Veterans Day, so it was very choppy, if I remember correctly.
That has moved back to to the 6th, which is, it's an all-Cape professional development day. So most of the Cape school districts have that day off, and there's a joint professional development happens in many areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The motion is to approve the proposed calendar for 2017-18. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. What I was doing, instead of paying attention, was trying to remember Miss Jensen's last name so I could apologize to her. It was my intention when I first saw the agenda to move the Calmer Choice thing up sooner than our housekeeping work like calendar things. I apologize for that, make you wait this long. So I'm going to put the regional agreement update after you, which is a very minor bone, but
all right, so it's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to really try and not, can I have my glasses? First of all, I want to thank Mr. Carpenter for inviting me, and I have a PowerPoint that I will see if I can get to work. Okay. So my name is Fiona Jensen, and it's not working. Do we have technology help? Does anybody know how to, what do we need to do?
Barbara, is that a
It's
remote
showing
that-
right here, it's just not showing up there.
No, Barbara, the remote control
That.
by the computer, this side of it.
No, that's me.
That's you.
All right, well, don't do that. That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Is that it?
I think this shot.
That was on a minute ago. Now it's not. See, this is my life. Never mind. I was asked to speak after the Sandy Hook shooting, and I spent the weekend preparing this presentation, and the PowerPoint didn't work, so it's still not working.
Well, stay calm.
we'll find it well.
Will you?
I
That's
think the
good.
projector's just.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to sort of talk because I've done this before. So first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak, and there it is. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, great. Good job. Thank you. All right, we're going to move right along here.
It was the threat of high school.
I know. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little, I emailed Scott saying, what exactly are we looking for? And it was sort of a combination of mindfulness and why that's important for education, regardless of its Calmer Choice, and a little bit about us, right? Because we happen to be that local gig in town, and we've been around for a long time. So I'm going to give you a little bit of both. Normally, this presentation takes an hour. I'm not going to do that. So I've tried to be really respectful of time. Normally, we would actually have you guys go through some of the exercises we do with the kids, which we're not going to do. Happy to come back another time to do that. So Calmer Choice is a nonprofit, as you know. We are experts in teaching secular mindfulness-based social emotional learning programs in public schools. We became experts pretty quickly last year. We were always secular, but we are now talking around the country about how do you bring these kind of skills to schools and be really mindful of the worldview that is opposed to this, right? And so we really looked at our program with a fine-tooth comb, and really it is skill-based that we're teaching. We work with kids pre-K through 12, though primarily it's elementary school kids. Since we began began in 2010. We've worked with over 14,000 students on Cape Cod in 10 different districts, 23 schools from Falmouth to Provincetown. We were in Chatham when it was, Chatham Middle School. We worked with the 5th grade there for a couple of years, and then we've done a couple of programs in Chatham Elementary School. So our mission is that we're a universal prevention program. And the reason I put that up there, and it's sort of bolded, is that we work with every single child. So we're not just working with the kids that are troubled or being pulled out for behavior problems or issues like that. The whole idea is we work with the entire classroom. And we're really committed, the whole purpose behind it and our mission is to teach young people how to safely and effectively manage stress, because we understand that stress is actually not a bad thing. It's what happens in life. It's how you manage it. So that we can teach them how to resolve conflicts so that bottom line is it's sort of creating children that live happy, healthy, successful lives. And underneath that, the goal is really to look at diminishing the risks of violence, suicide, and self-destructive behavior, which is where we started when we began back in 2010. So let's just talk about ourselves, and this is so why mindfulness? So how many of you in this room have gotten in your car at the end of the day and gotten home and then sort of had not much of a memory of how you did that, right? And a lot of people do that, right? Or reading a book and you've read the same page and you've read it 3 times and you have no memory of what you just read. And that's because we're on autopilot, which is the default mode network. It's where our minds go when we're not purposely paying attention. And the basic assumption is that we're often relatively unaware of these ingrained behavioral habits and consequently move through life on autopilot. It's not a bad thing. It allows you to drive your car, talk on your phone, have a cup of coffee, and still get home, But what they found is that greater than 50%, up to 95% of our time is spent on autopilot. And the more time spent on autopilot, the less happy we are. And the more time in autopilot, the more reactive we are, right? So why am I talking to you guys about this? So this is a comorbidity study that was done back in 2010, so it's a few years old. But the reason I like it is that it was representative face-to-face surveys of over 10,000 children in the United States. And it was face-to-face with the kids, but it also, the data was cross-checked with parents, right? So it's the children and the parents. And what they found is out of these 10,000 adolescents, ages 13 through 18, that almost 50% of the kids that they surveyed had at least one class of mental health disorder, okay? And this is across the country. A large number with anxiety, 31% anxiety, 14% mood. I'm not going to go through them all. The most important part was, 2 of them, was 1/4, so 25% of those kids actually identified having severe impairments. And the piece that strikes me is that fewer than 1/3 of those children are actually receiving treatment. Not necessarily because their parents aren't aware or the school's not aware, but the kids are not getting to a therapist. And as a mom who had a child that needed therapy in high school, I could hardly get her to school, let alone get her to a therapist's office. Right now, today, she's doing great, living in Miami, working full-time, supporting herself. That's great. But at the time, she was really struggling. So just quickly, onset for anxiety disorder these days is age 6. And actually where we're seeing it is even younger than that. Sort of the 4-year-olds are coming in with anxiety, 11 for ADHD and behavior, 13 for mood, and 15 for substance use. So if you look at that, that's why we work primarily in the elementary schools. And this is just a little bit about the Cape Cod students, which you guys are well aware of. You know that we have the highest suicide rate in Massachusetts and 1.4 times higher than other parts of the state. And we actually have double the addiction treatment admission rates and motor vehicle accident-related hospitalizations for 15 to 24-year-olds, and more admissions for opiate addiction than for alcohol in 15 to 24-year-olds. And this all comes from the Cape Cod Healthcare Community Health Needs Assessment. So we didn't make up these numbers, but they sort of support why social emotional learning programs are so vitally important. And what we also know is that most mental health problems that are diagnosed in adulthood, so for those of us, adults here, a lot of those begin in childhood and adolescence. So why not start upstream, right? And the other piece that's interesting, and I'm sorry if I'm going fast, but the American Academy of Pediatrics basically came out with a report that said that schools are the largest de facto provider of behavioral mental health services for children in the country, because that's where kids are. And it's not necessarily, if you speak to people in schools, they're not necessarily qualified to deal with what's walking in the door, but that's what's walking in the door of their students. And schools, so therefore schools really offer the ideal location to provide health and prevention programs in the schools. So this is kind of where we fit in. So one of the things that we looked at is, and this is a question for you guys, right? So of all the variables that are important in a child's success, which is what we're all looking for, the question is, what do you think is most important, right, as far as a child being successful? Is it race, primary language, family income, neighborhood? So it's actually none of those. What they found as far as success for kids later on in life, and they've done some studies on that, is self-control and self-regulation. That's like the number one thing as far as predicting success. So this came from a study in 2011 that predicts that childhood self-control predicts physical health, substance dependence, personal finance, and criminal offending outcomes, and that childhood self-control was actually more important than intelligence and social class, and actually mistakes made in adolescence. So, so why a mindfulness-based SEL program in schools? And what we know about mindfulness and mindful awareness is that it teaches us how to come back to the present and how to focus and pause. And it helps us deal with difficult emotions so that we can respond rather than react. And that's really key, is teaching these kids this ability to self-regulate for themselves. And I'm not going to go through all this, but the next piece here is that researchers have found that we have about 70,000 thoughts a day. I'm not sure how they came up with that number, but it's a real number. And what they found was most are redundant. So we've thought them before, and most of them are negative, right? And we're not, so if you think about it, mostly what you're saying to yourself in your head is probably not positive thoughts, right? And that's just the way human beings are. So with mindful awareness, we learn to watch these thoughts and recognize, oh, there it is again. Here, I'm doing it to myself again. And in realizing that thoughts are just thoughts and not facts, it creates that space between the thought and the action, right? So you can respond. So this is, I like to put this up there because when we look at, what is mindfulness or mindful awareness, this kind of does it, right? So you've got the dog who's out there in the woods or park, and the dog is just seeing the trees and the sun. And then you have me or you who's walking the dog and on autopilot thinking about all of these things that go on. And I can tell you kids have the same experience, right? All of the things that they worry about or thinking about. So what we do is teach the kids about coming back, paying attention on purpose. So why add mindfulness to SEL, right? Like you guys already have some social emotional learning programs out there. And a lot of those programs actually teach students to stop and think before they act. All those strategies are really important. But what mindful awareness adds is that element of stopping and steadying yourself and actually paying attention to what's going on inside your body. Where are your feet? What's that sensation? What are the thoughts that are going on? And in doing that, it gives us the space to choose a behavior, right? And that's the experience that we've had with kids when we've asked them about it. So what Calmer Choice is, and this, we're in a lot of schools and districts across the Cape, is our program is 8 weeks, twice a week, 16 lessons. For the older kids, it's once a week for 45. We have a variety of well-researched, simple, engaging activities and exercises that we do with the kids. It's led by our own instructors who've been extensively trained and have have knowledge in both mindfulness, but in particular secular mindfulness. So one of our experiences from last year is really paying attention to that, and expertise in teaching common choice to young people in public schools. So when we're talking around the country about secular mindfulness, if you're a private school, it's not so important, but there is the First Amendment, and it's really important that how you teach and what you teach, you can hold that up against case law. And that's what we've become experts in. So we ask classroom teachers to participate, and then we provide schools with a step-by-step plan to become fully independent over a period of 2 to 3 years, understanding that from a financial standpoint, it's not sustainable for you to continue to pay us to come back year after year. So we have a plan in place for that we're actively implementing in 3 different districts right now. So just really quickly, we've done a bunch of research. So we started as an innovative program, and we're moving into an evidence-based program as the research is being published. But just so you know, in the last 6 years, we were standing on the shoulders of a lot of studies that have been done. So this is thousands and thousands of students that have been surveyed. And these are what they call meta-analysis. So a lot of different studies clumped together, showing improvement in working memory, attention, academic skills, increased resilience. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all of them. I know that, are you a Dr. Carpenter? No. Okay. That Mr. Carpenter has copies of these. And I can, if anybody's interested, my email is actually in some of that literature. Happy to send them to you. But from our perspective, we knew right early on that we needed to research our program. And so we've worked with Tufts and Yale, and starting in 2012, and actually Chatham Middle School was part of the first study, we've worked with this is just one of the groups of 589 3rd through 6th graders. So in 2012, 2013, it was all new students. 2014, 2015, we started looking at impact for kids who've had it already once before, and were they still using the strategies that we had taught them. The next group of research that we've done again was with Yale, and this was with 246 graders in 3 different schools, and this was a comparison control group, so pre, post, and then follow up. So we had some kids that didn't get it, one school that didn't get it at all, and then 2 schools that actually got the intervention, and that was with Yale. And then really exciting was last year where we were working with MIT and Harvard, where we studied 99 6th graders in Dorchester, and they actually did brain scans. So this is Dr. John Gabrielli, who's a world-renowned researcher, and they actually did brain scans on children that we had worked with. Half the kids were getting computer programming, which we were not teaching, and the other half were getting a mindfulness program up in Dorchester. So, and these were just some of the measures that we've been using, Yale and MIT, and again, I can make this PowerPoint available to people. That a lot of really well-known studies, and the brain scans have never been done with children before. So it was this will be it'll be out there for the world to see because it hasn't been studied. And then really briefly, in the first group of studies that we did, we found that the kids with the greatest difficulties were actually the ones that made the greatest gains, right? So looking at emotional regulation, kindness, empathy, attention, focus. So that was in that group of kids. And then when we looked at them a year later, and what they were using it for were things like 86% of the kids, by the way, were using it. A lot of them using it for paying attention in class, being kinder. Big group of kids who, and this is across the Cape, and we've done this, this survey many times, having trouble sleeping at night. 40% of kids out there are having trouble with sleep. 45% of the kids who get our program end up using it for sleep. So, and this is 1 year later, kids were still using it for a lot of the same things. That is still quite a high rate because it's experiential. They're doing it themselves, not because they're being told to do it. Anyway, this is the Yale stuff. So greater knowledge of mindfulness showed better self-control. So that goes back to that slide about self-control and executive functioning. So the comparison group that had no common choice actually showed no improvement. This is the Yale research that we did. better school climate is what they noticed. Kids with greater mindfulness, perceived a more positive school climate, which for anybody that knows about risk factors and preventive factors, it's one of the major preventive factors that you want for children. And then just to, sort of getting to the end here, the MIT brain studies that we did, they found that the Common Choice Program children, so there were 50 of them, that they had enhanced sustained attention, and that there was functional brain changes that happened, and specifically in the frontal cortex that looks at focus and attention, which was really exciting when they saw that, and a decrease in mind wandering. So that ability to come back, so when you've got the kids that are out there looking out the window like my son, watching the leaves fall off the trees, his ability to come back to the math test was what the part of the brain that actually showed changes. And they found no changes in the kids that got computer programming. Nothing against computer programming, but because they had that was a control group. There were 50 kids that did the computer programming. So that was really fast and a lot of words. And then just really to end with teachers, we also have a program that we work with teachers, so we take care of the kids, and then we have a program, Common Choice for Teachers. And what we found, and Yale actually studied these teachers, was that the teachers that took the program had statistically significant improvements in focus and attention for themselves. And the one that they loved the most was an increase in working memory after our program. And what I know about teachers, not being one, is that it's an incredibly stressful position. And so it seemed to be something that was important to them. So that was really a lot in 20 minutes. And I am going to leave those quotes up there. I think, let me just see okay, so we'll just leave it with the quotes. So again, it was really compressed, and I know that, Melissa and I met a couple of weeks ago, and you guys are in the process of looking at the SCL programs and going through a whole battery to figure out what is the best thing. But I also know that our program is being well received in other parts of this peninsula of ours, and that we have really studied it, which is great. It drives me a little crazy, but it's so important. And now that there'll be a paper published, we submitted or Yale did to the something school psychology. Oh, sorry, I'm really tired. I don't know how you guys do this. The Journal of School Psychology is where they submitted the Yale study, and I have no idea where MIT it'll be in some major journal somewhere. So, that's where the evidence-based piece comes in, is those things get actually published, and we can actually apply to be an evidence-based SEL program with a mindfulness component. So there's nothing to vote on, but I'm here for questions from anybody, I guess just from the school committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Ms. Stout?
Yes, when I hear all this, it really gives me goosebumps, because the work that I do in psychotherapy every day, this is what I see the need is. And I think I'd be almost out of a job if we had people learn this. It seems like you have a lot of evidence right now, but what you're saying is that something has to be published before your quote called evidence-based?
Correct. There's a whole process through SAMHSA, which is, I know, where Melissa gets all of her data and ideas, right? In order to be an evidence-based program, there has to be 2 or 3 peer-reviewed journals that publish research done on your program. So, it's not quick. We started with Tufts in 2012. We started with Yale in 2014. It's now 2017. That paper is now going to be published. They found significant decrease in anxiety in 6th graders with the kids that we worked versus the kids we did not work. The ones we didn't work with, the anxiety just spiked in middle school. So, yeah, you have to apply. And so we're rowing the boat. We are gathering data. I mean, right from the very get-go when we started, because we are an innovative program, and it hadn't been done before. Nowadays, there's a lot out there, different people doing different things. I would caution you, if you're looking at other programs, about the secular piece. You know, you can't be doing the Om and the Namaste, and you can't have Dalai Lama attached to anything that's related to what you're bringing into the school. Like there's, and I'm happy to teach that, share that. But we're getting there. We will be an evidence-based program. It's just a matter of time at this point.
So do any of these, I'm just not knowledgeable about how to compare programs. Like your program is experiential. Kids practice that and integrate it into their daily life. Some programs are sort of like workbooks or things that are really good information but don't change their lives. It's all knowledge-based and not emotional integration. Is there any way that any of that gets compared ever?
Yeah, well, see, that's where the SEL programs with mindfulness component come in. I mean, mindfulness in education probably started way at the very beginning, probably 2001. It was first started being studied in 2009. The difference between an SEL program where you have all the knowledge, like the stop, drop, and roll kind of thing, is that's like a straight up SEL program. If you add the mindfulness piece, it's about learning about your amygdala firing off and what it feels like when you go into the stress response, which happens to all of us, and that your amygdala, you know, and we teach the kids about the dopamine and the serotonin and the cortisol and what happens when your amygdala fires, so that the kids go, oh, you know, I'm like losing it right now, these little people. I should practice my 5-finger breathing, which is the mindfulness piece. So I don't know whether there's been research done between responsive classroom and an SEL-based program that has mindfulness component to it, because it's new. You know, I know that Mind Up, which is a Goldie Hawn, the Hawn Foundation, is considered evidence-based. They've done a bunch of research themselves. If you go back to that slide with the thousands and thousands of kids, the meta-analysis, those are all different programs. We're not included in that. The difference between what we're doing is that we are looking at shifting a culture in a district. Like we are looking in Falmouth, for instance, over the next 2 years of getting all of their K through 7 schools independent from us, training people in the schools, and then supporting the schools afterwards, and then providing support for the teachers, and then teaching them to provide the support to the teachers. So it's a process. It's not an overnight thing. Financially, it's certainly an expense to the schools. We are not free versus some, but I would caution you about free, and I would caution you about, you know, the integrity of our instructors. And, you know, Carolyn McCutcheon is right here. It's a long process to become one of our instructors, because what we teach is really a skill set. It would be like me reading a book about playing the violin over the summer and then you hiring me as your music teacher. Like, it doesn't compute, because teaching the violin is a as-lived experience, and that's what we teach. And that's why the kids, you know, we hear stories about little 7-year-olds who are using their 5-finger breathing or their belly breathing, not because mom has said, use your mindfulness, but because they've experienced it firsthand for themselves, and so it's empowering. That's, you know, to teach a child who has test anxiety that they have test anxiety and they're not stupid, that their amygdala has fired off, and what they need to do is, when they're doing the MCAS test, is put the pencil down and close their eyes and take 3 mindful breaths. And they know that their prefrontal cortex will come back online again. And they don't look weird to their peers, because their peers know exactly what's going on, because they too have had that experience, right? And I can tell you, in Onset Middle School, that was after the first year of us teaching, we got feedback during the MCAS testing, the people who were proctoring it, who they couldn't understand what was, pencils were being put down and kids were practicing, because they learned that they're, you know, like I was one of those kids with test anxiety. I was a terrible test taker. You know, and like, what would it be like if the little person got that? It's just your brain. That's what brains do, right? And that's what we, you know, so that's what we teach.
Ms. Richardson.
Can you provide a ballpark cost for
That's
this?
a good question. So it really, yeah, so we charge $1,000 a classroom to teach Carolyn going in and teaching for an 8-week period. The school teacher, classroom teacher is in the classroom watching it being taught, right? So, you know, for Robin Millen's Chatham Middle School, it was $12,000. We were in there for a year. What we like to do is, and it didn't happen in there because it was just a pilot for that, is during that time, we like to do the Common Voice for Teachers program, which is optional. The superintendents in the other districts have provided PDPs for it, with the idea that someone is going to be kind of rise to the top about being that person trained in that school. So then the second year, we go back in again and we teach the classes, but we start teaching the school person. And that can happen by the end of the second year, we could be done.
Same $1,000?
Same $1,000. But the third year, you're paying $750 for we continue to supervise the person teaching because we want to make sure that the integrity of the program stays intact. We want to make sure that people aren't going rogue and bringing in drumming and finger painting and namaste and whatever, which I have nothing against all that stuff necessarily, but that's not what Common Choice is. And we want to support the equivalent of Carolyn in the school in what they're doing. And so that's what that $750. So you're going from $12,000 to $12,000 to $750. So it's a big drop. What I know is that in other districts, people have written grants. We have written grants. PTAs come forward. We have there was a presentation earlier about Puritan Clothing and Chatham Bars Inn, and people understand, especially now with the opiate issue on the Cape, people are like, we got to do something, and we've got to do something preventative, and it's got to be elementary. And so we're not wanting to move in forever. You know, my goal is to put myself out of business or turn into something else, because we get calls on a weekly basis from New Jersey and Japan, and I mean, not kidding, can you teach us to do what you've done, right? We don't know how to do that yet, but maybe it'll be like going from vinyl records to a DVD. Carolyn will be doing more online trainings rather than in class, we don't know. But, you know, there's 25,000 children on the Cape, and on an annual basis, we work with about 5,000 of them, right? 5,000 right now. So we're just touching, and that's elementary school, right? So, yeah.
Mr. Russell.
Thanks, Fiona, for coming. I go back to what Donna's question was about cost, because a lot of bumper stickers around that say buy local. And certainly as a school committee and the staff would think that product growing out of Cape Cod would be buy local. But the issue is, to me, all things being equal, $12,000 would be to process the learning over at Chatham Elementary, whether it's been done or it hasn't, for 1 year. So Howard Elementary would be double that, 25,000 times 3 years.
Right, sorry.
And in addition to that is you get a TOT going, and that teacher, there's a price to have that person go away to become trained as an in-house person.
So it's $1,500 to train a staff person.
Right.
A year? No, that's just to get trained.
For that piece, okay.
Yeah. So, and I think to answer that, Mr. Russell, we've never had a school pay 100% of it. There's always been grants. So, you know, in today's paper, you know, we just got $30,000 from Cape Cod Healthcare because they believe in what we're doing for prevention. The United Way, I mean, I raise, most of what I do is raise money in order to help schools pay for this. And then schools do what they can, right? And so I know that's like backwards for a school committee to not have that amount of money up front. And that's a challenge, right? But what I can tell you as the executive director and founder of this organization is there are people out there that will help to defray the cost of it for the school committee. And sometimes it's this act of faith, which is also not a great business model. But it's the way this has worked. And we're working really hard. Like the hope is if we can become evidence-based, that there'll be some money that'll come down from the Department of Education. So we've been talking to DESE, and we've been talking to the CASEL people, which is the SEL people, and there's a lot going on right now. So that hopefully there'll be some, there was there was $15,000 that was earmarked from Charlie Baker that we all lost, you guys included, but that money could have been earmarked towards a program like this. So, we, just like you wrote for the opioid grant, we wrote for the opioid grant. We're still waiting to hear, as you probably are waiting to hear. But, so, that's my job, is to find the grants. We put out 3, 4, by the grant writer, a month, looking for money. And typically what we do is we write it for overall programming. So we're in 253 classrooms this year. We divvy it up, right, as needed. Falmouth happened to be really, they've got $100,000 from the Tower Foundation, and they're looking at it as a pilot. So when I went back to Tower and I said, well, what about Chatham, or what about DY? They said, let's see how you do in Falmouth, and if it works in Falmouth, then we're open to working in other districts. So we're 1 year in there. That's the next research we're doing, is with the 4th graders in Falmouth. So it is a big cost, and I guess it's not being voted on today. It's not even on the table. But I think part of it is just making you aware that we would love to come back to Chatham and Harwich and figure out what that looks like. But we can't write a grant for that program if we don't have the school saying we're in. Right? I can't write a grant for maybe them next, it doesn't work. So I don't know if that's helpful. And
well,
again,
it is, and it's a shame with these stats and what we're living, and most of us can sense it on the Cape, what crisis we're in. It's too bad crisis has to be responded by voluntary money. So that's the status we're in. We don't have a line item. Obviously, it would be up around $100,000 a year that the taxpayers would take care of, and at some point I think they should. So, but that's not where we are right now.
Right. Yeah, and that's where, it is what we're doing on Cape Cod is actually being looked at around the country. As a pilot, like what would it look like if all of the children learn these skills, right? And so we're doing the best we can, capacity-wise. We are a 4-man show with an almost $1 million budget and 12 instructors, and we need to bring in more staff, and in order to do what we're doing with integrity. And we have, from the beginning, with utmost integrity, created what we've created, which is why we're now traveling around the country talking about secular mindfulness, because there's a lot of mindfulness programs out there that are not secular. They say they're secular, but they don't really understand what that looks like, right? So, that's, I think, why we're being asked to speak to others.
Ms. Long.
Yeah, thank you so much. The presentation was excellent. Just a couple questions.
Yeah.
Congratulations on heading towards the evidence-based. That's exciting. And you made it, I think, I just want to verify for whoever's watching, not spiritual, but it's medically based.
Absolutely.
And that with 2 to 3 publications, et cetera, in journals is when you guys earn your evidence-based
to
apply for it. My question from that is, will anything change for the program, positive or negative, once you are evidence-based? Will anything be required differently of the schools participating? Will you have to collect informed consent, medical history, because it's medically based?
No, so it is, we work very closely with guidance when we're in the schools. So one of the things that we learned last year, and we always offered it, but we learned last year because of what we walked through with DY, is before we begin a program, we don't begin any of our programs now until October, with the idea that in September we meet with the staff We do a, full-on staffing service. We meet with the parents, we answer any questions. The only time that, there's always opt-out available, and I know at Chatham, there were a number of parents maybe who opted out their children, that's fine. And we've always offered that, that was always there. Most of it's very few we find that parents opt out, but that's perfectly fine. The only time we have parents fill out consent forms like we did in Chatham is when we're doing research. Because we have to go through an IRB and all of that kind of stuff. So nothing, the only thing I think that will change, and I think it'll be to the positive, is funding, available funding for school districts, because we will be part of the SAMHSA evidence-based SEL programs. And truthfully, our goal is actually not to replace responsive classroom or second step. It's really to work with, right? So we're in Eastham where they are fully on board with second step. And our program is just like hand in a glove. It just reinforces what the teachers are already doing. So, but yeah, I don't think there's a downside to becoming evidence-based, except there'll be more demand for us, and yeah, I'll have to grow the capacity of the organization.
The IRB?
Yeah, Internal Review Board.
Okay.
So anytime you do research with a university, that they have their internal review board, and we become city trained, and yeah, that's the integrity.
So when you're collecting data, you have to have signed consent for that?
It's up to the university. So TAFS was a signed consent. That was with Chatham Middle School. We only did the surveys on the kids that parents said yes. Yale was opt out. So parents got something home and you could opt your child out. And again, we're not in charge of this. This is the universities there. MIT was by absolutely assigned consent, because your child was, sitting in an fMRI scanner for an hour and a half doing focus tests and stuff. So it really depends on the university. And right now, MIT has probably done its thing for now with us. It was exciting and great. But Yale's the university that we're working with right now.
So it will vary based on which university and who's collecting the data.
Correct. And we're probably, my feeling is do we have to keep researching? Really? We've worked with thousands, we've researched thousands of children. I'm kind of hoping that one day we can stop researching, because that's not really what I'm not a researcher. I'm really good at telling you how to create a good research thing now, because we've done it since 2012, but that's not, we're doing it because we want to show the schools that there's really solid evidence to the good.
And so one more part.
Sure.
The only other area I was just a little fuzzy on, and I don't know if Caroline would like to speak maybe about her experience being trained as a trainer, because you had mentioned that the instructors have extensive knowledge and expertise in teaching Commerce Voice. And I wanted to know how long that takes your instructors to do, and then what's the difference between that and the $1,500 training, which is over the course of 3 years, for our teacher who may take on the role of being that person in the school?
That's a great question. Okay, so our training is for anybody, whether it's your person or Caroline. It's a 60-hour training. That is the $1,500 price tag. And that is in class and experiential, but it's nothing in the classroom. So once you've done that training, then for us, you have to apply to be an apprentice. The apprenticeship is when somebody would actually go in, and so this would be a school person. Let's say you were a school person, you wanted to be trained. So you do the 60-hour training.
Which is in school with my classroom?
No, the 60-hour training is training that you come to us and we train you. Okay, so you're getting the underpinnings. Then you go into the school and you watch Carolyn teach a full 16 lessons. And you're just observing. And then, if all goes well, then you teach. She teaches. It's like watch one, teach one, watch one, teach one, watch one, teach one. And then, if you work for us, you then have to apply to be one of our instructors, which you either will get hired or not. For the school, that would be the school would then you would be independent in Chatham Elementary to teach this, and we would supervise you. So we would do like a once a month supervision with you, so that you would stay connected to our instructors. So that's the intensity of it, but it maintains the integrity of our program.
And what if something changes in the program?
That's so when something changes, because our curriculum lives in the cloud, that's the $750 that the district would pay on an annual basis. That would give you access to
For however long we do the program?
Yep.
$750 a year?
Yep, that's it.
Not per class?
Nope.
Just a year?
Absolutely.
And what do you think is the optimal amount of teachers, like say Harwich Elementary, that we would have to train to support that school?
So Quashnet Elementary is grades 3 through 6, and there's 27 classrooms in there, and they have 2 trained people. And I think Harwich is probably that size, right? So probably 2 people in Harwich, 1 person would be fine in Chatham. And you probably could do just 1. And I mean, it kind of depends, and it depends on how much flexibility that person's job description is, right? So the 2 people that do it at Quashnet are adjustment counselors, and they have the blessing of the superintendent and I can't say blessing, they have the okay from the superintendent and the principal to go and actually teach, and they divvy up the school so that all the kids get, and they didn't call it Karma Choice, it's just part of the curriculum.
So how many hours a year does each of those teachers
get supervised?
Do they actually run one of their do one of these programs in the classes? Like how they
It's
go?
It's up to the school. Our programs, so if you work for Chatham and you have 12 classrooms, the program itself is 8 weeks long. So Robin would help you figure out your schedule, and between September and June, you would provide programming to all 12 classrooms. And the program's half an hour, 20 minutes twice a week for 8 weeks.
So ideally, it wouldn't be a grade level teacher that would be doing this. It would be a special,
correct.
The librarian.
So
the art
at
teacher.
Osterville, in Orleans, it's the librarian who wants to be trained in math. And we leave that up to the principals and the superintendents to make that decision, because who are we to say, we can't. It could be a second grade teacher, but how's she going to get out of her classroom to teach the 5th grade? That doesn't make any sense. So it's a dance.
Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Can I kind of follow up on what Jackie was asking? Sorry, this is Brett Long. So you've mentioned about cautioning other mindfulness programs that don't have as long of a training period in terms of a quick
training period. So I would caution free, because I'm not sure what that training is. There's some free apps and all that kind of stuff, but I would just be mindful.
I have one on my watch.
Yeah, and that's great. But to teach a whole bunch of kids, if you're great. So I'm not saying that our training program is the best training. I can tell you Mindful Schools has a training program that's 3 times more expensive than ours, and they have a week long and another week long, and then they have all this online stuff. So, Mind Up is $8,000 a school, and they come in and, they train the entire school. And so I think you can look at other programs and see. I would caution schools from, you have to do, and I know Melissa's doing, due diligence and looking through stuff. I walked into her office, she had a stack of books that she was going through. And a lot of the books, I know the people who wrote the books and stuff like that. We are here, we've researched ourselves, it's a program that works. So, I'm happy to keep coming back.
I didn't really start my question off well, but no, that's okay. So I guess where I'm looking at is if it costs $1,500 to train a staff member to spend that 60 hours and then also follow around Miss Caroline and watch her teach and then take turns teaching, why do we have to have the first 2 years of you guys in our schools?
Well, first of all, so that the teachers can see it taught. So one of the things we know, there's a model where we just train the teachers. Other people have done that. It doesn't work very well, because there's something about watching somebody teach it, right? So for a school just to train somebody, how are we going to train them to apprentice if we're not actually in their building? You can't send somebody from Chatham Elementary to Station Ave in Yarmouth to watch Carolyn teach. She's got to teach probably in that building because that's where that person teaches. So if we're going to be in the building anyway, then we might as well work with your kids. Now, do you have to do all 12 classrooms? I suppose that's a conversation, right? So in Sandwich, we're working with, they have a teacher who teaches something called the 7 Cs. So we trained her, and now we're in there working with the 3rd grade. It's a huge school. They're going to need more than one person, so now the superintendent is looking at training. The ideal way to do it is for the entire school to get it. Does it have to be done that way? No.
All at once for those 8 weeks?
Yeah, well, or over time, like I think with Robin, we staggered it, so we did it, and we did half the school, and then we had Christmas, and then we did the other half of the school. And that's the dance, that's the like what works for you, what can you do, there was a point where we said, we'll only do it if we do the entire school, because we know that's the best, Let's talk about it. Like if you want to do, in Falmouth, they're doing grades 3 and 4. And now we're going back because we got more funding, so now we're going to do grades 1 and 2. But we didn't know that at the beginning of the year because we didn't get the funding until just now, so.
Ms. Stout. Oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
No.
Okay.
A little bit of a follow-up on the grades. You talk a lot about the elementary schools, but not so much about the middle school. I know a lot of your studies went 3 through 6.
So we are in the middle school. The challenge is the conversation you guys had prior to me, like where are you going to put it? So in the high school where we started, because my daughter was in high school when I started this, and I've never taught this, just so you know, I run the business side of it. There's rotating classes, and so in the middle school we train the health teachers. So at Matakey's, we've trained the health teacher to teach this, and she teaches it in health class. Same thing with Cape Cod Lighthouse Charter. We've trained the health teacher, and she just drops it into her health class. So at Cape Cod Lighthouse, it's grades 6, 7, and 8 that are getting it, but we're not teaching it. That's, Miss Allie teaches it there. At Matakey's Middle, it's Jackie, and she's teaching it to grades 6 and 7. In the high school, we're looking at that. I mean, my vision is, if let's say you had kids in Chatham or Monomoy who get it, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, get into the middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade. What if there was something in the high school that was like an elective or an after-school program? But these kids will have it in their toolbox. Like we're doing a senior project, working with a senior at Mashpee High School who's, got it in 6th grade and hasn't had it since, and she uses it all the time. Not because we are there teaching it to her, but because she's had it. And she uses her 5-finger breathing, and I was like, wow, that's what we want. We want, when kids are stressed, to know that, wow, what did I learn from Mrs. McGuire again when I was in 4th grade, that and they use it. So we don't want it to go away, but we figure elementary school is much easier. It's a better dose.
I'm good for now.
Ms. Stout.
Wow, you guys are like...
I really appreciated what you had to say about some of the schools, such as Eastham Elementary, who has another program, Second Step, that does broader areas, but they're more cognitive, rather than, well, some of it is experiential, but not so much mindfulness, so that this could go into that. And just for history, I will say that several years ago, when I was the counselor at Chatham Elementary, I would go into every classroom, as you're saying, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and teach social skills. And it was wonderful. 2nd Step or another one, skills dreaming. And they were wonderful, but only to the point that they were experiential, were they really wonderful. Our budget is prepared for next year, so there's not really wiggle room for that. But if you see, like I do see some people on your list of donors that are from this area, if you do see money that looks like maybe we could do in a grade level or more than a grade level, could you come back and tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that the decision is actually run through these two sitting to my right. So I would absolutely, and you're right, but that goes back to, if we don't have a guess, it's hard for me to go after some of the people who live in Chatham that believe in what we're doing, and there's plenty of them. So yeah, I mean, I said to Melissa, we don't have capacity right now if you said to me tomorrow, we want you in Harwich full on, we're in so many other schools, we would grow towards that. But it's plannable, so if I had known at the beginning of the year that we were going to be in Chatham, I would have planned it for that to happen, so, yeah.
Mr. Russell.
Kind of a housekeeping question, Fiona. Back in the day, a lot of schools are in 5, 7, 8% of ins and out kids that arrive in Thanksgiving, Christmas break. Let's say Falmouth, you've exposed a lot of skills for the Falmouth system. So how have they handled late arrival, new youngsters, 4th grade coming in, teachers had the exposure with her 20 youngsters, and she's got 3 new kids in the room, as do all the other classes that have had it.
So I don't know, Carolyn, if you've had that experience of being halfway through a program and a new person showing up in the class and how that's handled.
It's just a natural progression. It's so substantial that a new child arriving in the classroom, they just like they do in all their other, everything else, they just learn it as they're doing it.
Yeah.
It really hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of every class is a review of the class before. And as Carolyn said, it's so experiential that it's not like, when you come in halfway through with algebra and missing the first, even 2 weeks prior, you're in trouble. That's not the case with us. So it hasn't really been an issue. And we have kids that don't speak English, in Hyannis West, Brazilian new kids. And they somehow just assimilate. It's amazing. So it hasn't been a problem.
Is there anybody who has not yet asked a question who would like to ask a question?
Nice.
Ms. Scott, last call.
Last question, I promise. How many schools that you currently work with use funding from their budgets versus grants to, not for the $750 fee
a year, yeah.
after the 3 years, but, to start the program for the 3-year process?
So I'm just thinking in my head.
Be mindful.
I'm being very mindful. I'm going to Falmouth. No, that's on Branson from the Substance Abuse Coalition. Mashpee has some. Patty DeBoer, who's the superintendent, was the principal. She just earmarked $6,000 a year. She held on to it like a pit bull. I don't know where she got it, but she did it every year. DY, we have a couple of principals, the same thing, where they earmarked it.
But not the...
It's not a line item that's called Common Choice.
Well, no, I just mean, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, that's okay.
To put it in both elementary schools, presumably 1st through 4th grade, it would be about $36,000 a year.
Yeah.
So
what we did in other, in Falmouth, we're in grades 3 and 4. And we're training somebody by being in grades 3 and 4. And then as I shared, all of a sudden we got a grant from the Falmouth Foundation. And so I'm meeting, not tomorrow because of the snowstorm now, on Monday morning with the superintendent. We're looking at, okay, we have enough money now. Do you want to do grades 1 and 2? So we can train somebody, as long as we have a pool of classrooms, we know that it works best if we can work with that it works best if every classroom gets it, and that would still be if I had my brothers, especially in little schools like these. Let's just get them all. Let's teach everybody, because then it benefits the classroom teacher as well. So
the majority use grants.
A lot of them use grants, and again, I think it depends. Kara Woodbury finds money in her budget, and she has a line item. I know it's not called Common Choice, but it's probably under the SEL.
Right.
And she divvies that up amongst her. She's got, 5 elementary schools and a middle school. So.
What about parent fundraising? Because I know Chatham Elementary's pilot was.
So I just did a PTA at Casey Coombs, which is K-1-2, and the parents are getting the school $2,500 to help towards their $5,000 that they needed to raise. The DA gave some money, and then there was an anonymous donation. It's pretty interesting if you look at where our money comes from. It's kind of a bookkeeper's bit of a nightmare. And somehow at the end of the year, it all works out, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
Having to do with your repeated points about being secular. First question is, did you satisfy the members of the DY school committee
We did.
that you are less of what they didn't want you to be?
We were never what they thought we were. And yes, the concerned parent basically chose to opt out her children, which was always an option. And I think what's interesting is the biblical Christian, and he called himself that, law firm, sort of, I think, pats himself on the back that we sort of stood up and paid attention. There was very little about what we did that we had to change. But what we did, and I think this is why we're being asked to speak, is even though initially my reaction was, what? Really? You know? We paused and we said, okay, let's find them. We went and found the most conservative Christian pastors, and we said, here's our curriculum. Like, can you look at it? Like, we've never called it meditation. We don't teach yoga. We've never used a bowl. We don't quote the Dalai Lama, you know. Can you look at, like, is there anything in here? Like, we're not chanting. We're not, none of that, right? There was one lesson that they looked at that was potentially, we used to call it sending kind thoughts. They didn't like that very much, so we changed it to a lesson on generosity and kindness, you know. So, you know, I think that it was that whole idea of, you know, imagine being that parent. And imagine that parent going to talk to the principal before she had her child. You know, imagine, oh my God, that they found out that this was going to be in their school and they didn't, you know, there was misunderstanding. And so we really took it seriously. And,
And my question wasn't to hammer home the difficulty you had in that particular circumstance, but I'm actually curious about, it strikes me that this is the kind of a program that the school system benefits if the majority of the people are doing it.
Correct.
So has your emphasis on making it secular, have you experienced that there has been a reduction in the opt-out rate?
There was very few opt-outs to begin with. You know, Ezra Baker, who had it in D1, never had an opt-out, still doesn't have an opt-out. Station Ave, there's a couple of families. Any small, there was never any opt-out. Matikes Mill, there's a few opt-out. Quashnet, they had a few. So it hasn't changed.
So by and large, the opt-out rate is low.
It was low. It was low. And I think that, you know, the response has been really positive in 99.9% of our cases, which is, I think, why we were a little blindsided. And probably why Carol Woodbury was a little blindsided, because we had been researched and, you know, and had been so out there with parent in-services and in the paper. And anyway, so I think it just made us realize, you know, especially in this political climate, it's really, not everybody thinks the same way you do. And so, and that's great. You know, like, that's what makes us this country, but we got to be careful of each other, you know, and I think we did that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Shoot.
Last item on reports and discussions, regional agreement update. Mr. Russell has a proposal he'd like to discuss. He has some tentatively proposed language, if you would pass that out to each member so he can explain it to us. This has to do with, as I understand, Mr. Russell, this has to do with our discussion about the ability to determine, the ability to have students from the school department determine the possibility that students would have to attend an elementary school in a town that they do not live in.
Correct. I'll take a minute because I think we've talked about this for 3 or 4 months. It speaks to Section 5 location and ownership of schools, where there is a descriptor in the original document regarding the two elementary schools. And it ends, one of C ends with by saying, except in special cases as defined by the regional school committee. That's about as close as this might come. My suggestion is that as a committee, for the future, we would want to assure the fact that the two elementary schools have the same, school committee has the same authority to make judgments as they do the middle and the high school, specifically to the teacher-student ratio in K through 4s. Right now, in the last couple of years, I think either through school choice or through happenstance or whatever it might be, I don't think there's an issue here. The first 2 years of our regionalization, Chatham Elementary K4 had significantly less kids per grade than Howard Elementary K4. Significant. 19 to 20 in a classroom over at Howard Elementary, 13, 12, 14 over at the either first grade, kindergarten, third. I don't have the stats, but that's how we started out. What caught my interest for several reasons. As a region, we have double the size of the number of kids over in Howard Elementary. Those teachers are the same teachers that we're paying at the Chatham Elementary teachers for the same assessments from Howard, being about 75% of the funding goes to those teachers. And to have an surety that as years go by, the superintendent would have the right to monitor that, so that in fact, if there's 1 or 2 youngsters off per grade, fine, but if ever there was a drop in numbers, the committee would discuss that as to how best, and I don't have the answer, how best to get some equity in all of those K4 classrooms in both elementary schools. It may in fact be having some East Howard youngsters over a period of a year or 2 move into wherever the numbers would be to closer, make those numbers equal. So that's the idea behind it. It reads, it would go on to section 5, location and ownership of schools, item 4, based on the revision documents. I would suspect that if there's some understanding on this, that we'd take it to Kevin Bergnahan, our attorney, to have him clean this up. But basically, students in grades K4 may be reassigned to schools outside of their respective towns in order to maintain an equitable balance of the student-teacher classroom ratio.
Any comments? Ms. Ryder?
Just a question. We have this on our reports and discussions. What are we discussing? The overall language of the regional agreement, just this little piece that Terry has proposed? I'm not really clear on what we're doing here tonight about the regional agreement.
We've had meetings. We've had our own meetings about the regional agreement. We've had a meeting about the regional agreement. We've had presentations to the two towns, and we're just continuing the process of discussing the regional agreement to see if there's any other. We're not necessarily forming an opinion on the proposed changes that have already, or the changes that have already been proposed. My goal is to see if there are any other proposed changes from any members, and also to get any update on any of, I have an update, for example, on another matter, just so that everybody's aware of the status of the proposed changes, and when we get to the point where nobody has any additional ideas, then I would hope that we would be able to vote on a final draft of proposed changes to the regional agreement, with the idea of then presenting it to the two towns as soon as we can. It may not be this year, the way we're going, but at some point.
Okay, the reason I'm asking, well, there are a couple reasons, but one of them is that we have a proposed change here that one person is proposing, but maybe, 6 of us aren't agreeing with the proposed change. How do we handle that particular situation? Not just for this specifically, but other changes as well.
Well, I think that you can take up any topic about any changes that you want. Mr. Russell has a specific proposed change. Seems like a logical thing to discuss it and get off-the-cuff feedback. If there's a majority of people whose initial reaction to this is favorable or unfavorable, I think it would help. If there's some idea that a change of this type might be beneficial, then we would make the effort of having our attorneys draft it up in a more appropriate language. But I think I've asked that at each so-called update, I've asked people to come in with any changes or concerns they have. So The floor is open with regard to the proposed changes. Everybody's had a couple of copies of the draft agreement with the draft changes, and the floor is open for comments on any of them. Although I'd like to at least start with additional ones before we start discussing the ones that have already been proposed.
Including this?
Well, this is actually something we have talked about on a couple of occasions. This is the first time anybody has come in with a draft of what the change would look like.
I believe at our last meeting, I think is when Terry said he would come in with specifically what he wanted written.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we're getting it now, if that helps clarify.
So, go ahead.
So I have two things. One is that I would like to make comments on this, and another is that I would have another proposed change, which we already talked about that we would need to discuss. So I take that up after this?
Well, let's take up this one first.
Okay. This proposed change, I think it should be made clear that this language specifically, so that we can get public comment on this. I'm not sure that we would get favorable reaction. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I would like to hear from our constituents.
Okay, well, that's certainly reasonable. Ms. Stout?
So it says, students in grade K4 may be reassigned to schools outside of their respective towns in order to maintain an equitable balance of the student-teacher ratio. I really support that the student-teacher ratio is important. I think it needs to be equitable. The part that's difficult for me is I don't want to force families to do that. But our interest is Harwich East. There have been many comments over the years about that possibly a bus could come into East Harwich and pick up students from that town or area of Harwich. And I think if we made that available and advertised to the people that are in that, if we knew what our need was, that without having to upset people by reassigning, I think that we'd, get what we want.
I think, if I could respond to that, I think one of the concerns is, or one of the suggestions and discussions on this has been, because if the agreement is changed to allow this to happen, it doesn't compel it to happen. In other words, if this language was added or amended to the original agreement to allow, reassignment, it doesn't mean that an individual school committee in an individual year couldn't say, well, let's not do it this year, either because the students aren't, living in the right geographical areas for bus travel times, or we don't need to do it this year because the class sizes are roughly equal. But there may occasionally be a time where there's a significant change in student population in the middle of a school year. And so a decision, or new people move into town, for example, and in order to not upset the class size, you might want to have on an ongoing basis, the school committee might want to have on an ongoing basis, or the administration might want to have on an ongoing basis the power to do it. It doesn't compel it.
In the middle of the year, which force somebody to change?
Somebody moves into town, somebody moves into Chatham or moves into Harwich, and Harwich is, we already have a capacity situation in Harwich. If they've moved into East Harwich, and therefore it would make more sense for the system for them to be in Chatham, for example. I think Ms. DeLong had her hand up, didn't you? No?
Yeah, I just was basically going to say the same thing you did, but it's just a something to add in there in case of, because it wasn't previously in the regional agreement. It's just kind of like a safety loop that we have an option, and I don't think that the intention is to make anyone worry that they're not going to have to be within their district, but that there's an option for us if it comes to that. That was the only reason we were putting it in there. It's kind of like a loophole just in case we need to do something, but I don't think there's any intention that we need to be doing anything at this time, and there are other options in which we could do that, which we did talk about, the bus times and possibly, like you said, redistricting East Harwich. If that ever happened, this would allow us to do so if we needed to. There's a lot of other options that will happen before this.
Mr. Russell.
As I read all of the articles here, everything else other than the ones that spoke to the early governance committee have been yellow lined out. This struck me as something that it's non-existent. That it says that the superintendent or the school committee, there is no statement in there that says anything regarding the K-4 balance of students in each school if left alone. And it's absolutely right. I put down here may. It just gives the school committee the authority through the superintendent to review numbers. And if all of a sudden a trend over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 years created a situation, which I doubt that would happen, but it could, that there were very, very small classes, K through 4, and take, for example, Chatham, then I would be protective of, for example, the Howard elementary staff. Because over a period of years, you just could not endure that. To have a teacher making the same salary in grade 3 with 19 or 20 children, year after year in the same grade level, with their colleague having 14 students. So at some point, the school committee, with the superintendent in the future, would figure out a way to make certain that wouldn't occur in some fashion. There's nothing in the document that says anything about doing that. So I think it probably would be prudent of us to create, and not necessarily my words, I just got on a piece of paper, but this has been kicking around in discussion since September. So it's something that I think would be prudent to have in here. And it wouldn't go other than through the selectmen, and both town meetings would have a chance this year and next, whenever we get around to cleaning this up, to vote it, and if it remained in there, someone would explain from the floor what we were trying to do to make certain the numbers were even in those elementary classrooms. Contractually, you'd have an issue if they weren't.
Mr. Carpenter.
I just want to emphasize, it's not something that we need to do at the moment. It just gives the possibility if the numbers don't balance well on their own. At the moment, for the last several years, I've reached out and worked with Sam to essentially put out an all-call to Harwich families who's interested in a smaller elementary school. They're different just by size, and a number of Harwich families do opt for Chatham Elementary School, and that has helped keep the class size balance relatively in check. And on average, the Chatham numbers have been slightly smaller, but fairly close over the last couple of years. The thing I emphasized when Brian and I spoke to the Harwich Select Board about this is mathematically for our district, 8 sections per grade level at the elementary school is sort of Monomoy stable state. And ideally, that's 5 sections at Harwich Elementary School and 3 sections at Chatham Elementary School, which would then break 62.5% of the students over at Harwich Elementary School, 37.5% of the students over at Chatham Elementary School. But the math of our district is 73% of our population is Harwich. So we need really in any given year for at least 10% of those Harwich families to come to Chatham to have that balance. And if that doesn't happen organically, then we're going to have a situation where those class sizes get off. And it creates, I think for our staff, it creates an inequity, but it also for our students that are in the classroom and their educational experience, it creates an inequity for them too that we have to address.
Ms. Reimer.
I think, as Sharon has said, it's important to maintain the equitable balance in the student-teacher classroom ratio. Though I'm not sure that having just this one item in the regional agreement is the way to do it. If in fact, as Ms. Long has said, that this would be like a last resort, that all other options would be tried first, well, then let's put those other options in there and have this be an option if those other ones don't work, such as, sending buses into East Harwich to bring the East Harwich kids into Chatham and other things, working with Sam as Mr. Carpenter said working with Mr. Hunt, as Mr. Carpenter has said he has done, for this year and perhaps prior years in order to make this more of an equitable ratio. I think it's important to put those options in first so that those are exhausted first, and this isn't just taken as, well, here's the easy thing to do, just reassign them. That would be my concern. I'm not finished.
It's okay. Doesn't work.
No, that would be my concern, that that's what would happen. And also, who's going to have the say over whether this happens or not? Is it the school committee?
Well, I think the presumption is that it would be administrative.
So not the
Not
school
going to
committee?
come to not going to come to a school committee meeting to discuss one child and one family.
No, but it could be discussed overall as a, hey, we're going to exercise this option.
Oh, I think that's true.
And leave that purview with
That
the
would be a
school
policy, that would be a policy discussion at that point. You know, you can, and keep in mind, you can have a provision in the agreement that allows you to do something, but have a policy of the school committee not to support it at any particular time, for example. Also, I want to point out that actually there is language in there already that allows this kind of thing, but only under very specific circumstances. So
I know.
This is actually a broadening of an existing power. Just so that for I'm not disagreeing with it, it's just clarification. Mr. Russell.
I think on this one particular article, I disagree with Karen. I wouldn't want to complicate it. I think the statement speaks for itself. For example, there's a statement in that says, in some exceptions, it could be allowed to transfer students with special needs. But it doesn't say .1s, .2s, .3s, or be kids or youngsters of this type. I leave that to the judgment of the leadership team, the superintendent, and the future school committees. That in fact, it would say, if the equity looks like a trend over a period of future years, the superintendent and his team would see that happening and bring it before the school committee. And he would, or she, would be asked to come up with a solution. Hey, I'm going to contact these township families. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, rather than have a list. But
Ms. Stout.
How often are we allowed to go into this and try to change the regional agreement?
Well, we're required to review it every 5 years. But I don't believe there's any prohibition on making any proposed change in any given year.
So if there was a need, we could at that time address it.
Well, you can't you're not going to ask, I assume if you're talking about a specific need for a specific group of people, you'd have to call a special town meeting of both towns. That would be prohibitively expensive.
So you're saying that it needs to be done in time for any year's town meeting?
Right, well, preferably, right. If towns are already having a town meeting, you really don't want to ask them to have a special town meeting.
Right, I certainly agree with that. But we would have an opportunity once a year to look at this and to change it then, if it looked like that was happening.
You would open it up to discussion to the voters of both towns, right? Mr. Russell.
Question, Sharon, I mean, leave it alone because that suggestion could just be looked at each year and then write it then.
Right, there's no problem at this point that we need to do this, and we have looked at, for instance, if we were saying that there were, I don't know what a number we would look at. If Chatham was 5 lower than Harwich, or there'd be some sort of criteria, we'd say that there's inequity. And then, to me, Plan A would be saying we're willing to put a bus to go into, just for an example, East Harwich, if the most children are there, and going, how many people in this area would like to take advantage of that, and see what you could get from that, because it's always so much better when people see it as an advantage to them rather than they're being forced to do something against their will.
You know, I'm not thinking about people being forced. It's similar to the Unit A contract. There are many, many articles that go on year by year. It's in there and written, but many times it's not acted on because teachers might not come forward to ask for this grant. All I'm suggesting is that we put in this document a statement that reads that this school committee in the future has the right to consider how best to bring equity back to something that doesn't exist. It may never occur, but at least you wouldn't be saying, oh, let's quickly write something in, now we can tell the public we're going to do it. It would be part of this document, which it doesn't exist now.
Mr. Ryder.
I just wanted to address something that Sharon said, which is that just the phrase, people would be forced. That's what's bothering me about this as well, that it has a potential to force parents to send their kids from one town school to the other town's school, whether they want it or not. That's really the issue I have with this.
Scott?
Would it be possible to add into this by vote of the school committee or upon, I don't know, I'm asking a question, to put in there that it's not just a arbitrary decision?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking the same thing. We already have some provisions in there that require that, you know, if it's going to affect the Chatham school, a certain number of Chatham members have to approve it, you know, for capital expense. I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Anything
But
that has,
anything.
anything.
You know,
that has
we talk about our purview. Well, our purview can be created by the regional agreement. So if there was language like this, but there was a clause that required that in any given year for the administration to do it, that it would have to be approved, you know, by two members of the town, that, I mean, I don't think there's any restriction on the language in particular. The only restriction would be legal. You know, we can't do something that isn't, but, and again, I want to hear what everybody has to say, but I just want to throw out an idea. Is there enough, you know, is there enough interest in the concept to suggest to the town, to the school attorney, that he put together some possibilities of it? Not that you wouldn't be, I mean, if we put together a regional agreement because there's been some interest in it, and we've got the attorney to draft language, it doesn't mean when we get to the final product, you haven't pre-approved it by just acknowledging that there's enough interest to at least explore it further. I mean, we can keep talking about this all night long, but is there, can I get some feeling as to whether there's enough people who want to explore it that we would continue to even talk about it, maybe with better language? Could I have a show of hands? We're not voting for it, but just sort of a consensus as to whether we should explore it further?
I'd like to explore it further.
Okay, that seems to be.
The lawyer could add some verbiage, maybe that would help us define it better. Because I agree with what Terry's saying. I think it's important that it's in there, but maybe that there's some specific ways that we should legally have it in there, some verbiage we need to use, and maybe there need to be some restrictions, boundaries, some different things in there. Like maybe it needs to be a little more specific, or maybe it doesn't have to specifically say student-teacher ratio. Maybe it can say something different, and then they can speak to that. Because I don't want to, as much as I understand where Karen's coming from, I think if we start putting in examples of how we would do it before we would do this, that leads to a bigger discussion.
Sharon and Karen have both suggested that they support the idea of an equitable balance in student-teacher ratio. So really it's a question of how to do it, not whether to do it.
Yeah.
So that seems to me to be enough of an interest to come up with language that would be acceptable.
Absolutely.
Sharon?
So, if something said, something like, if after offering bus pickup in East Harwich and asking for volunteers to be bused to the lower enrollment town, and there were not sufficient students volunteering, then and that would be much more agreeable to me, and I think parents.
Perhaps you could, Karen, Ms. Ryder's agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So, perhaps the two of you could propose some sort of, we could present the outline of a couple of versions and send those off to the attorney for, option drafting. Ms. Scott?
To follow up on what Sharon is saying, that might go more into maybe the policy of
how to implement it.
How to look at this. That could say this is where those steps would be laid out. I don't know.
Ms. Ryder?
Maybe it could be as simple as having some language in there that says if voluntary options, don't result in the student-teacher classroom ratio, then they may be reassigned. Just some sort of clause there, right up in front before this.
I agree if it said that there was busing provided, because that's the stumbling block, that there are probably many more people from Harwich that would have an interest in looking into Chatham, except they have to bring their kids there and back.
And my sense is that there's no, that suggestion is perfectly valid, because there's already no attempt to force anybody to do this.
I think it's very reasonable.
Yeah. Your suggestion, I'm saying, is well received. So we'll explore it further in the interest of tonight's meeting length, okay?
Yeah, fine.
I do want to report on one other thing before I open up to any additional proposed changes. You recall that I had sought an opinion from the Attorney General's office with regard to whether we would be able to, if we chose to, or if the two towns agreed to amend the definition of quorum. And we did get the response back from the Attorney General's office that if the regional agreement was to provide, as I had proposed, that a quorum is a majority of the currently serving members as opposed to a majority of the total number of members. If the regional agreement provides for that language and it's approved by the two towns, the Attorney General's office would also approve it as a legal change. So that's just my report on that. Any thoughts or comments on that? And anything else on the regional agreement that anybody wants to bring up? Ms. Ryder.
Just the advertising of a vacancy, if there is.
Oh, yeah.
Is a vacancy outside of the term? Somebody resigns, and we have that situation. We need to put the language in there. I guess, because I'm the one that keeps bringing this up, I need to propose the language.
Well, I seem to have reached out to you on that issue.
And I couldn't the other day. Okay, I will do that for next time.
Everybody is aware of what she's referring to.
Because we had a long discussion about that with the selectmen that came to the meeting.
Karen, didn't the selectmen say that they agreed it was their role to do that? I thought recall.
No.
When we hear this, they said, yeah, that's something I think was Dean Castro.
Dean said that we should be having that in the regional agreement, that some provision for what to do, and that there should be an advertising process, and that it should be, on their website, it should be on our website, and so forth and so on. I don't know if we got into that kind of detail, but he did say that he was in favor of that, instead of what we had before, which is we didn't really have any kind of.
I think there was discussion about what the duration should be.
The duration, 30
so that
days
the
or 60
decision
days.
can be made, so that it can be, position can be filled as quickly as possible.
But Mr. Nicastro was actually in favor of a longer period of time. I think I mentioned 30 days, and he's at 16. That's what I recall.
And he'd also mentioned something about a resume. They wanted to request a resume. Wasn't they were discussing that?
I don't remember that.
Ms. Scott.
Along that lines, because after the meeting, I did do some research, and I've had conversations with Brian about it, and having some provision in there about what would be our responsibilities and what we would like the selectmen to do to be in the regional agreement, and what we would be doing in terms of the advertising and that type of thing would be more policy for us. And I looked at several regional agreements, and I'd say, I don't know if I found one regional agreement that had anything other than the language that we had, which is where it came from. But in conversations with Brian, he pointed out that we want to make sure that we have something in there. I hate to say the word forcing, but
Well, our policy can't make the selectmen.
yeah, the
do
selectmen
something.
can't follow our policy. So anything that we are asking the selectmen to do for us, we need to have in the regional agreement. Anything that we're looking for on our perspective, from our point of view, it might behoove us to have a policy that describes the steps that we take if a vacancy occurs. So just kind of putting those two things together. I am not necessarily saying that one has to be and one doesn't. It's just thoughts that I had way back when we initially met about it.
Ms. Ryder.
I was told in between that meeting and this one, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, that there is a provision in Massachusetts law that any elected body, when there is a vacancy, there is a time period and there are requirements. So I haven't looked it up myself, but we would have that as a starting point. But there is a minimum of 30 days, I believe it was, and something else involved with it, but it's in law.
That would definitely be worth exploring.
Yeah, I know, I just haven't had a chance.
Mr. Russell.
My thought initially on this was that I thought once the replacement is known, the select board, they're the ones that create that, they're the ones that appoint that replacement in both towns.
The selectmen and the remaining members of the town.
In the two, yes, okay. I guess what I'm trying to do is pass the buck nicely to the selectmen in both towns, that they would incorporate, maybe through our suggestions, once they're notified through the town clerk or whoever it is, something should trigger, either in our document or in theirs, that they agree to have 30 days or 60 days, or whatever it might be, a resume. Now, whether that belongs in the document, ours, so be it, I guess.
Well, it is triggered, because once you go and sign papers there, it triggers, they're all contacted.
The selectmen.
The selectmen are all contacted, and then the candidate's notified. And I would assume that parallel to that, that the school committee is notified at the same time.
But I think Terry was talking more about when there is a vacancy on the school committee. Before someone comes forward, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, if the selectmen sign, if the selectmen sign off on it, then they would be agreeing to be bound by it.
Right. Because at some point it becomes their role to let us know when is the interview going to take place, where it's going to take place. That's sort of out of our hands.
And it would be nice to, but it would be nice to have it consistent with both towns as well.
Sure.
You know. Anything else? Any other topics of regional amendment? Hearing none. That would be all reports and discussions. We've voted on the action items. Are there any other subcommittees? What did I miss?
Go ahead.
Are there any other subcommittee reports? We've had a policy subcommittee meeting. Report? None. Mr. Carpenter. Oh, did you have a?
We didn't have any other subcommittee meetings?
Not. Is there anybody who had a subcommittee meeting that wants to
report
report on it?
With the collaborative, but due to the time, I'll share with you.
Next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Carpenter.
I guess I have been multitasking while sitting here, given that the weather forecast hasn't gotten any better. So I was in that process of mulling, do you cancel school, and when is a timely, when can you timely reach parents? And as the meeting was going on, did I say drawing? I was worried that we're starting to get a little too late for that phone call going out. But anyway, so thank you to Joy and Katie and everybody that have helped kind of get the word out. It was cute as I was coming.
What is that word?
Thank you, Joy. The word on the street is.
If you answered your phones.
I'm not on my phone during the meeting, Mr. Carpenter.
So school's closed for tomorrow.
Darn it.
But as I was walking in the meeting, it was the cutest thing. I was talking to the Chatham Elementary students who were coming here to present. And I was like, so what do you think? Should we have school tomorrow or not? And it was a split vote. And one of them said the cutest thing. She's like, no, don't cancel school because it's boring at home. There's much more excitement, much more to do at school. But it was a cute conversation. Just a couple last things that were also recognitions in your package. As I said, tomorrow we'll see. Weather dependent is this the southeast sectional basketball tournament. We had a parent who wishes to be anonymous, donate a fan bus for the high school students. So we'll understand by about roughly 2 o'clock whether or not the game can go on. And so it's a 7:30 game, which is after the storm. We'll have gone out to sea, and it's just kind of a question of how the roads are between here and Brockton, and whether Brockton was able to dig out after this. I would also like to thank the Art of Charity once again for a donation. They donated $275 for a field trip for 30 students to attend a Cape Cod Community College Youth Summit, My Choice Matters. Art of Charity also donated $350 for membership in the Cape Cod Organic Farm Community-Supported Agriculture Program for a culinary arts program. And the Chatham Police Association donated $500 to help support Chatham Elementary School's Read with Malcolm Mitchell program. And the Garden Club of Harwich donated $479.84 for the purchase of energy monitors for the high school Earth Club. So thank you to those that are supporting all these different endeavors.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Now, I know that, Ms. Ryder.
Could I ask a question? Do you have an update on the school start time situation?
I don't have an update on it. There you go.
Could you provide a clarification on the start times? Because I'm looking at different things and I'm seeing very different information.
So what needs clarifying for you?
Well, we voted on a 7:45 start time for the elementary schools and 8:30 for the middle and regional, for the middle and high schools. And we have in the newsletters and on the website that it would be 7:45 and 8:45, and the elementary start times would shift backwards. But I think what we had voted and said was that they would shift forwards.
I think it says...
And the middle and high school start time, it says will move, but I think it was that it would not move. That's what we said
I think it's
specifically.
been corrected on the website.
As of 5:40, it had not been corrected, even though I requested this 3 times starting January. So that's why I'm asking for some clarification, because the information that has gone out to parents and that is on the website and in the newsletters is not matching what we've been given or what we voted on. So I'm just looking for clarification and where we stand in this.
I think what we voted on when I brought the start times here, I discussed the challenges if we start the high school and middle school at 8:30. It puts us in a situation of potentially having elementary students at bus stops at 6:30 in the morning or 6:35. So we discussed trying to sort of split the difference and shift that time to 8:45, which would put us in a situation where, at least on the first estimates from Cape Destination, only has 3 school buses picking up students before 7 o'clock. And
Actually, I think it was 7:01 a.m. was the earliest.
what was that?
I think it was 7:01 a.m. was the earliest for elementary school.
I think if we have the start time at 7:45 for the elementary schools, there are 3 Harwich buses that have to pick up just before. I think one of them, it was like 7. They're all about 7 or 6:55. And so the conversation at the table at that meeting was, when Cape Destination actually populates with real ridership data, when we get the kindergartners, do we shift the high school start time closer to 8:30, or do we shift the elementary start time closer to 8 o'clock that would allow that, make sure that we have hopefully no one on the bus before 7. So it's the latter that we communicated out.
So the vote for 7:45 a.m. and 8:30 a.m., we've already missed that goal. We've now gone to 7:45 and 8:45. I thought that was what we were trying for, and that if we needed to move it, we would. It seems that we've started at 7:45 and 8:45, and that
it could move from there, and potentially not in the direction that we had approved.
I don't think I understand.
That we started with a 7:45 start time and an 8:30 start time. Those would be the two start times.
What, just to clarify, when did we decide that?
That's what we voted on.
When?
When did we vote on this?
Last year?
This last spring, or was this the vote that we did a couple months ago?
I don't think we voted a couple months ago.
We
I
just
think it was-
discussed it.
Yep.
We just, okay,
This
thank
was-
you.
this was the prior
So the
vote.
vote last spring.
Yeah, last spring. Sorry, I don't remember exactly when. Yeah, last spring. May 25th. Actually, I have it here. That vote. So it was, my impression was that we would start from the goal, which would be a 7:45 start time and an 8:30 start time. Yet it looks like we've started from a point of 7:45 and 8:45 already, and that it could move from there, instead of starting with what we voted with.
I think I explained at the meeting and already at this meeting that I started the conversation with a high school. If we start the high school at 8:30, that was the goal last year. It's just the goal, when we spoke with the bus company, puts us in a situation that we're putting elementary children at bus stops shortly after 6:30, which wasn't acceptable to me, and I don't think it was acceptable to anyone at the table here. So I talked with this group, including you, about coming up with a compromise position that tries to best meet the various different wants.
So could I just ask, that means that the two times that you've proposed now are not going to shift further away from what we voted on? Would that be a true statement?
Well, I think that, again, we need to see when Cape Destinations actually populates it with real ridership, we'll know if we can have a time close to 8 o'clock for the elementary schools. But we need to lock something in, and we need families to start preparing. And so if they know the school start time's roughly around here, that's going to be, 10 minutes, possibly 7:45 or possibly 7:55, 8 o'clock, at least they're able to prepare and not see it as this abstract. And I think that's the important thing, that we need families to prepare.
Before we discuss this any further, I need to ask Mr. Carpenter a question. There was expressed a need to have an executive session at tonight's meeting. We're going to be ending this no later than 10 o'clock, if for no other reason than we have high school students who are operating it, and we're going to let them go. So do we need to have the executive session, or could we do that at the next meeting?
We do. It need not be very long.
Okay, well, we're going to need to leave time for that. So we're not technically talking about school start times on the agenda. I agree that the website needs to be clear on it, but I don't want to go too much further on this in light of the time.
I'll just be brief, may I?
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
say, I just don't want this to shift further. It's already shifted. I don't have a problem with the slight shift because of the bus ridership issues. That's fine. I just don't want it to diverge even further from what we approved. And I would like to have this information corrected that's on the website and in the newsletters, and that went out in the email blast, because it's incorrect.
Shall be done. Ms. Stone, Stout, whatever your name is.
Stone is fine with me.
Sharon Stone.
I never wanted to be Stout. So, how about the end times for the kids?
It's a 6.5-hour school day, so it would depend on when it starts. So if you're starting at if you're starting at 8:45, that's 3:15.
3:15.
Is that right?
3:15 for
Do the
high
math.
school
Do the math.
and
Okay.
2:15 for
We're all done. We are done with our regular meeting. We need to go into an executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second to go into, is there a second to go into executive session?
Now you can do your.
You can.
Aye.
Aye.
I know, too late.
Carrie, pay attention.
What?
Executive session, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
The chairman votes yes, so. And one no. We will be going to executive session, discuss strategy with respect to non-union administrator contracts, and we will not be coming back into a regular session.
Until this.
Good night, all.
Thank you and good night.
And get your shovels ready.
These are done from this end.
Carly,
Hi,
you're looking a
Katie.
little tan.
I will not be here next